Chapter 87. Ning Shu looked at Su Meng, who was kneeling in front of him. Her face was full of grief and helplessness. She seemed to be in extreme pain and her eyes were full of struggle. Su Ran, I know you hate me, but this has nothing to do with Xiao Yan. Please save Xiao Yan. If you are willing to save him, I will never appear in front of Xiao Yan again. Su Meng's face was full of sacrifice for love. She gave up everything she loved and would rather suffer and endure the pain. Ning Shu was speechless. He was speechless. He was really speechless. Su Meng burst into tears and said, as long as you promise to let Xiao Yan go, I promise to break up with Xiao Yan. Plops. Mr. Xiao also knelt in front of Ning Shu. The muscles on his face trembled as if he had been greatly insulted. He said, please find Xiao Yan. In the future, you will be the mistress of the Xiao family and Xiao Yan will not divorce you. When Su Meng heard this, she sat on the ground in a daze. She looked miserable. What was so good about being the mistress of the Xiao family now? First, the Xiao family had no money. Second, Xiao Yan was now a criminal. Even the old couple of the Xiao family had nowhere to go now. What was so attractive about being the mistress of the Xiao family? Why did Mr. Xiao still feel so good about himself? Did he really think that others cared about his son? Ning Shu didn't speak and directly called Li Xiuwen. After a while, Li Xiuwen came. Seeing Su Meng kneeling on the ground, he quickly helped Su Meng up and asked, are you okay? Su Meng shook her head in tears and said sadly, I'm fine. I'm just too worried about Xiao Yan. When Su Meng said this, Ning Shu clearly saw Li Xiuwen's face twitch for a moment. Then he recovered his gentle and considerate look. Was it really okay to mention Xiao Yan in front of Li Xiuwen? Was it really okay for Su Meng to provoke Li Xiuwen like this? Fortunately, Li Xiuwen could hold back. Ning Shu said to Li Xiuwen, tie up your dog. Don't let her run around. Look how crazy she is. Li Xiuwen didn't say anything. He just left with Su Meng, whose body was weak from crying, and Su Debao, whose face was gloomy. Old man Xiao, who had been kneeling on the ground, was already old. After kneeling for such a long time, his legs were numb. Seeing that Ning Shu was ignoring him, his face twitched. It was humiliating for a father-in-law to kneel in front of his daughter-in-law. It made old man Xiao, who had been domineering his whole life, feel incomparably humiliated. Therefore, even though old man Xiao was kneeling, he looked at Ning Shu with hatred and disgust. Ning Shu also felt drunk. Looking at old man Zhao's attitude, a normal person would not save Xiao Yan. Asking for help should have the attitude of asking for help. However, Ning Shu really wanted to get Xiao Yan out. 2 years in prison was really too easy for Xiao Yan. What if Xiao Yan became a tyrant in prison and recruited a lot of underlings and became the boss of the underworld when he came out? Xiao Yan was the male lead of this world. He was very lucky. Taking advantage of the fact that Xiao Yan had nothing now, he wanted to get him out and make him completely unable to turn over. Ning Shu spent a lot of money and found a lot of connections to get Xiao Yan out. Ning Shu looked at Xiao Yan, who was wearing a prison uniform. His head was shaved bald. His appearance had decreased a lot. Xiao Yan's eyes were still unruly, with a sense of superiority. Anyway, Ning Shu didn't know where his sense of superiority came from. When Xiao Yan saw Ning Shu, his first sentence was, Su Ran, you vicious woman. Even if you save me, I won't love you. Ning Shu. Xiao Yan looked at Ning Shu coldly and sat in the car. Ning Shu didn't bother to talk to him and drove back to the community. When Xiao Yan walked into the house, his first reaction was the same as old couple Xiao. Old couple Xiao was excited to see Xiao Yan. Mrs. Xiao told Xiao Yan about Ning Shu's abominable behavior, which made Xiao Yan look at Ning Shu even more coldly. Especially when he heard that Ning Shu asked his father to kneel, his eyes were full of murderous intent when he looked at Ning Shu. Facing Xiao Yan's expression, Ning Shu sneered coldly. Did he really think that all the women in the world loved him and should tolerate him? Xiao Yan was full of depression. He felt like a dragon trapped in shallow water. He locked himself at home and refused to eat. No matter how old man Xiao and Mrs. Xiao tried to persuade him, it was useless. Ning Shu looked at the food in front of the door. Since Xiao Yan didn't want to eat, he didn't want to eat. Ning Shu directly threw the food into the trash can. Seeing Ning Shu's action, Mrs. Xiao was so angry that she gasped, but she didn't dare to say anything. Now the Xiao family had to ask Ning Shu for money for everything. If they annoyed Ning Shu would refuse to pay and they would starve again. Once, they starved for a whole day. In the end, Mrs. Xiao came to Ning Shu to ask for money to eat. Only then did Mrs. Xiao and Old Man Xiao eat. Every time Mrs. Xiao and Old Man Xiao looked at Ning Shu with hatred and humiliation, but they didn't dare to say anything. Seeing Ning Shu throw away their son's food, Mrs. Xiao couldn't help but say, "Su Ran, how can you be so vicious? Xiao Yan didn't even eat when he came out and you threw away his food." Ning Shu snorted. "Since you don't want to eat, don't eat anymore." Mrs. Xiao looked at Ning Shu. "You will get your retribution." Ning Shu said coldly, "I don't know if I will get my retribution, but you will soon get yours." Hearing this, Mrs. Xiao trembled. Thinking that she had to take money from Ning Shu, she could only swallow her anger. In the end, Xiao Yan came out to eat because he was hungry. Ning Shu personally handed the food to Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan looked at Ning Shu condescendingly and sneered. "Su Ran, no matter how you please me, I won't change my mind about you." Xiao Yan took the bowl from Ning Shu's hand and ate. Because he ate too quickly, he choked. With a big bald head, he looked really wretched. Ning Shu watched from the side and smiled coldly. "I hope you'll be fine after eating this meal." Knowing that Xiao Yan had come out, Su Meng brought the two children over. When she saw Xiao Yan, Su Meng's lips trembled, and then she threw herself into Xiao Yan's arms. She reached out to touch Xiao Yan's bald head and said with a trembling voice, "You've suffered." Ning Shu almost laughed his pants off. This scene was funny no matter how he looked at it. Li Xiuwen stood not far away and looked at the two people hugging each other. His expression was very complicated. Ning Shu could not describe it. The two children hugged Xiao Yan and cried. Xiao Yan comforted one and the other. Xiao Yan said to Su Meng affectionately, "I will pull myself together and give you and the children something to rely on." Su Meng covered her mouth and shook her head. Xiao Yan was very anxious. "I won't let you and the children suffer." Su Meng was still crying. She looked at Ning Shu with a painful expression. Xiao Yan noticed Su Meng's gaze and turned to Ning Shu. "You evil woman, what did you do to Su Meng?" Chapter 88. Vicious Woman, Vicious Woman. Now Xiao Yan didn't even call her name. Every time he opened his mouth, he would call her a vicious woman. Xiao Yan hugged Su Meng and glared at Ning Shu. "If you dare to hurt Su Meng, I won't let you go." Su Meng shook her head at Xiao Yan. "It's none of her business. I decided to leave you. As long as you come out, it's fine." "Xiao Yan, forget me. You are my woman. I won't allow you to run away from me." Xiao Yan hugged Su Meng tightly and roared, with a vicious look in his eyes. "Su Ran, give up. You actually used me to threaten Su Meng. You are vicious." Ning Shu didn't know what she had said to Su Meng. It was always Su Meng talking to herself. She was the one who said that she would leave after saving Xiao Yan. Ning Shu sneered and tore apart the two people who would never be separated from each other. He directly pushed Su Meng into Li Xiuwen's arms, then turned around and slapped Xiao Yan in the face. Then another slap in the face and then another. Ning Shu patted his hands. "Xiao Yan, look at the situation clearly. If you keep calling me a vicious woman, I will let you die miserably, very miserably." Xiao Yan was slapped in the face one after another. From the bankruptcy of the Xiao family, to the imprisonment, and now, even his beloved woman was threatened to leave him. Xiao Yan's heart was burning with anger. Xiao Yan roared and stretched out his hand to hit Ning Shu. Ning Shu grabbed Xiao Yan's hand and then gave Xiao Yan a handsome shoulder throw. Xiao Yan fell to the ground with a bang. Xiao Yan felt that his waist was about to break. Before he could react, he felt the stiff soles of shoes stepping on his face. Ning Shu smiled evilly. He stepped on Xiao Yan's face and rubbed it hard. The people around looked at Ning Shu's actions with a dull face. The first to react was Su Debao. He came over and kicked Ning Shu, shouting, "Let go of my father, you vicious woman." Ning Shu pushed Su Debao away. Su Debao fell to the ground and cried loudly. Su Meng hugged Su Debao. Su ran. What did the child do wrong? Why are you treating the child like this? Kids should act like kids. Get out of my house. Ning Shu pointed at the door. Get out of my house. Don't disgust me in front of me. Li Xiaowen took Su Meng away. When they left, Su Meng's face was full of pain. She kept looking at Xiao Yan, whose face was bruised and swollen. In the end, she was pulled away by Li Xiaowen impatiently. Su Debao turned around and looked at Ning Shu, his eyes full of resentment. When Xiao Yan's parents saw their son being beaten like this, they were so angry that they couldn't speak. They didn't dare to say anything, because Ning Shu now controlled their lives. Even if they wanted to buy a green onion, they had to ask Ning Shu for money. Xiao Yan locked himself in the room again. Then he came out to eat because he was hungry. After eating, he locked himself in the house again. No one knew what he was doing. Old man Xiao was still counting on his son to rise. He found Ning Shu and said that he wanted to borrow money from Ning Shu to let Xiao Yan do business. Old man Xiao kept saying that the husband and wife should be honored and the couple should work together. Ning Shu directly rolled his eyes and ignored Old man Xiao. Old man Xiao was so angry that his heart hurt and his blood pressure soared. He was so humble, but the other party still didn't agree. Not to mention the situation of Xiao family, Su Meng was very sad. She was in pain as if the sky was falling down. Li Xiaowen first comforted her. In the end, Li Xiaowen couldn't stand it anymore and finally slept with Su Meng. Su Meng felt that the world was about to collapse. This gentle man actually treated her like this when she was the saddest. Su Meng looked like she had nothing to live for. Li Xiaowen liked Su Meng in his heart. He was gentle and considerate to Su Meng, but Su Meng still refused to forgive Li Xiaowen. Li Xiaowen was a little annoyed by Su Meng. Sometimes, he didn't care about Su Meng's feelings and directly pushed Su Meng. After that, Su Meng felt sorry for Xiao Yan and resented Li Xiaowen in her heart. Then Li Xiaowen and Su Meng started a sadistic love story. They slept and cried, cried and slept, slept and woke up again. There was also Su Debao, who had a high IQ. He directly used his hacking skills to invade the bank system and gave a sum of money to Xiao Yan. He wanted Xiao Yan to make a comeback and was determined to let his mother and father be together. Ning Shu saw that Xiao Yan, who had been dispirited, suddenly became radiant. He intuitively felt that there was a problem. Then he beat Xiao Yan very violently and took a bank card from him. After knowing that the money was actually given to Xiao Yan by Su Debao, Ning Shu sighed. He was moved by Su Debao's filial piety and then called the police. People like Su Debao, who didn't have a sense of right and wrong, didn't have a country in his heart, and had a high IQ, could definitely become a terrorist. It would be better if the country could control and use him. Otherwise, people like Su Debao would be very dangerous. Probably because Su Debao got too much money, the police immediately began to act. No matter how bad Su Debao was, he was only a 6-year-old child. He was caught by a fully armed police. Ning Shu knew that Su Debao used a loophole in the bank system to give Xiao Yan hundreds of millions. Hundreds of millions. Su Debao, who was caught, was directly sent to the juvenile detention center. When Su Meng heard the news, she almost fainted from crying. First, she ran to beg Xiao Yan, but when she saw Xiao Yan, she was so shocked that she forgot to cry. Finally, when she heard the person in front of her affectionately calling her name, Su Meng's face collapsed. Because the current Xiao Yan was fat, very fat, and his whole body was swollen, like an inflated balloon. His face was no longer as handsome as before. With every step he took, the floor trembled. Looking at Xiao Yan, who was like a moving mountain of meat, walking in front of her, Su Meng's face was pale and in disbelief. With a pig-like face and affectionate eyes, if it was the previous handsome face, Su Meng was afraid that her face would blush and her heart would beat faster. But now, there was a nauseating feeling, which made Su Meng's face even paler, and her body was on the verge of collapse. Su Meng didn't even say a word and turned away, not mentioning the matter of asking Xiao Yan to save her son. Seeing Su Meng avoiding him, the fat on Xiao Yan's face twitched twice, and his greasy face looked a little ferocious. Xiao Yan turned his head and shouted at Ning Shu, who had been leaning against the door and watching the bustling scene, "You vicious woman, what did you do to me?" He. Ning Shu spread her hands and looked at the fat Xiao Yan. This was indeed done by her. In Xiao Yan's 3 meals a day, Ning Shu put a lot of hormones in it, and then Xiao Yan quickly swelled up. What would true love between him and Su Meng be like if he didn't have a wealthy family or a handsome and seductive appearance? Su Meng's performance just now, hee. Chapter 89. Xiao Yan was now eating more and more. He was a rice bucket. The more he ate, the fatter he became. The fatter he was, the more he ate. It was a vicious cycle. Seeing his son become like this, Mr. Xiao sighed every day and hoped that his son would rise up. But now his grandson was in the juvenile detention center. Mr. Xiao was in great pain. There was nothing more painful than seeing hope slowly dashed. Mr. Xiao's hair turned white after a period of time. Mrs. Xiao had to do laundry, cook, and mop the floor all day long. She was supposed to be a sugar baby. The collagen on her face was quickly lost, and her whole face was sagging. She was no longer as plump and young as before. Now Mrs. Xiao had no time or money to do a facial. The old couple was now struggling at death's door under Ning Shu. They were satisfied as long as they had something to eat. Every time she asked for money from Ning Shu, Mrs. Xiao would show a flattering smile. She was no longer the elegant Mrs. Xiao of the past. His entire being seemed to have aged. Even though Xiao Yan had changed beyond recognition, Xiao Yan still had a proud heart. He still treated Ning Shu coldly. Sometimes, his fat eyes would reveal a vicious look. At first glance, it was obvious that he was up to something. Ning Shu sneered and said in front of the Xiao family, "I've already written my will. If I die, I'll donate all my assets in this house. When the time comes, you guys can eat dirt. Bitch, you vicious woman, I am your husband, your money is also my money. Why did you donate it? Bitch, I must have had 8 lifetimes of bad luck to marry a jinx like you." The fat on Xiao Yan's face trembled, incomparably ferocious. Ning Shu sneered and said indifferently, "I'm not a jinx. If you want to talk about jinxes, it should be Su Meng. The Xiao family's downfall happened after you and Su Meng got together. Don't forget that I've been married to you for nearly 6 years and this happened? It would be best if he could have a love-hate relationship with Su Meng." Now, Ning Shu was not even interested in Xiao Yan's body and trampling on Xiao Yan's dignity. Instead, he was taking advantage of himself. Xiao Yan struggled, his fat jiggling. Finally, Ning Shu roared, "You bitch, I won't believe your words. Alright, if you want to deceive yourself, then go ahead." Ning Shu didn't intend to let Xiao Yan see her good side. Although Xiao Yan didn't believe Ning Shu's words, Su Meng had run away when she saw him, which left a shadow in Xiao Yan's heart. On the other hand, Su Meng wanted to save her son, so she could only beg Li Xiuwen. Su Meng put on an expression that said, "As long as you save my son, you can do whatever you want." She had sacrificed a lot for the greater good. In her heart, she still felt the pain of betraying Xiao Yan, but she had her own difficulties. In the end, Li Xiuwen still went to save Su Debao, but he couldn't even see Su Debao's face. The people in the juvenile detention center directly quarantined Su Debao. They were very strict. Such a young child with such ability, they were determined not to let him into society. Moreover, the people in the juvenile detention center also found that this child's mentality was somewhat twisted. He didn't have a sense of right and wrong at all. He was too dangerous. Even if Li Xiuwen had the means to save Su Debao, who was defined as a dangerous person by the country, it would be fine if he could be brainwashed, but if he couldn't be trained, he could only end Su Debao's life at the age of 18. Even Li Xiuwen couldn't save Su Debao. Su Meng was completely desperate. She looked like her world was collapsing all day long. She cried and stuttered. Facing a pair of swollen eyelids all day long, Li Xiuwen was also a little impatient. The number of times he came to find Su Meng became even less. Su Meng was even more desperate. She felt like she was abandoned by the whole world. She was even sadder. She hugged Su Xiaobao and cried every day. Su Xiaobao's face was wooden and gloomy. He persuaded his mother not to cry. However, after a long time, Su Xiaobao stopped persuading her and just listened to Su Meng cry all day long. Even in such a situation, Su Meng didn't go to find Xiao Yan. It was probably because Xiao Yan's face was too impactful. Then, Li Xiuwen got married. The person he married was a rich family's daughter, and not Su Meng. When Su Meng found out about this news, she felt that her world was gloomy. Li Xiuwen, that gentle man, also betrayed her. Su Meng felt that God wanted to send all the suffering to her. She was really in pain. At the wedding of Li Xiuwen and the rich family's daughter, Su Meng asked Li Xiuwen with a face full of pain and despair. Why did he betray her? Li Xiuwen's face was black at that time. He directly asked people to throw Su Meng out. Ning Shu knew that the supporting male lead didn't get together with the female lead. He pursed his lips. Now that he had successfully become the male lead, he actually didn't want to be the female lead anymore. He was so unambitious. Serves him right to be the supporting male lead. However, it seemed that Xiao Yan and Su Meng, the supporting male lead, had been separated. Li Xiuwen's halo was also gone. Li Xiuwen's new wife was also not a kind person. She directly took back the house that Li Xiuwen gave Su Meng and chased Su Meng out. Su Meng, who had nowhere to go, could only find a dirty and small rented house to live. Su Xiaobao, who was already 6 years old, was already at the age of going to school. However, Su Meng didn't seem to have thought of this. She was sad and didn't think of earning money until she ran out of money. Su Meng could only look at Su Xiaobao with a pair of innocent almond eyes. In the end, she said to Su Xiaobao with a strong face, "Mommy will definitely work hard to support you. I promise." It wasn't that Su Meng didn't think of looking for Xiao Yan. There was once when she secretly went to look for Xiao Yan. She found that Xiao Yan was now as fat as a pig. Not only that, he was also missing a leg. Because he was too fat, he couldn't sit in a wheelchair and could only sleep on the bed. There was a strange vomit-inducing smell in the house. Of course, the smell was a little unbearable. As for how Xiao Yan lost his leg, it was because Xiao Yan knew that his son was going to be locked up for the rest of his life. He was too anxious, and when he went downstairs, he fell and fractured his leg. It was fine after a plaster cast. When Ning Shu heard the doctor's words, Ning Shu exclaimed in surprise. He signed the surgery book and directly said, "Cut it off." After knowing that his leg was gone, Xiao Yan looked as if he had gone crazy. He looked at Ning Shu with red eyes. "Su Ran, even if I become a ghost, I won't let you go in this life or the next life." Ning Shu smiled indifferently, looking incomparably cold. However, it made Xiao Yan feel cold to the bone. This woman. Su Meng left and never came to look for Xiao Yan again. When Ning Shu found out, he just smiled indifferently and didn't say anything. True love was just like that. They didn't have to worry about daily necessities. They had endless money to spend on romance. They didn't have to do anything. They didn't have to worry about, "I love you, you love him, and he loves her all day long." It was an unparalleled and beautiful love that was untainted by the world. Chapter 90. Su Xiaobao sat in front of the door of the dilapidated and dirty rented apartment. His face was a little dirty, and he no longer looked as innocent and cute as before. He heard moaning and panting sounds coming from the door. Not long after, a fat man came out. When he saw Su Xiaobao, his eyes were filled with lust. Su Xiaobao walked into the room. There was a strange smell in the room. Su Meng was lying on the bed with a blush on her face. Seeing Su Xiaobao come in, Su Meng passed the money to him, saying that it was for today's meal. Su Xiaobao took the money with a blank face. Ning Shu knew that Su Meng had walked down the path of Su Ran in the original plot, selling her body to live. He was a little stunned, but it was normal. Su Meng and Su Ran were both daughters of rich families, and they didn't have any life skills. Su Meng was lucky to be the female lead, and she would have a powerful man to protect her, so she wouldn't have to live a miserable life. Su Meng's character was innocent and delicate, and she didn't eat the food of mortals. Now, in order to survive, she had to make sacrifices. Ning Shu didn't even make a move, and she was already like this. She was quite good at acting. Mrs. Su brought Su Lan to Ning Shu to apologize. Ning Shu looked at Su Lan, who was looking up and couldn't be bothered with him. Su Lan didn't look like a noble and elegant prince anymore, and he was full of gloominess. The changes in the family had brought some changes to him. Ning Shu laughed and secretly gave Mrs. Su a lot of money. The Su family couldn't even be considered a well-off family now. Mrs. Su looked at Ning Shu in shock. Ning Shu directly told Mrs. Su to not let Su Bo and Su Lan know about this money. In the original plot, Su Bo ran away with Su Lan, leaving Mrs. Su, and Su ran alone. This money was for Mrs. Su, and Ning Shu believed that Su Bo still had money in his hands. Ning Shu had a feeling that this world's mission was about to be completed. Hurry up and leave, leave, leave. Ding, mission completed. Do you want to leave the mission world? After an ear-piercing sound, Ning Shu heard the cold mechanical voice of the system. Ning Shu never felt that the system's voice was so beautiful and warm. Hurry up. Ning Shu said anxiously. Then, Ning Shu felt like the world was spinning, and he almost vomited. When he opened his eyes, he was already in the system space. Ning Shu let out a long breath, and then let out a long sigh, as if he wanted to let out all the depression in his heart. He had never felt so tired. Do you want to check your points? Yes. A screen appeared in front of Ning Shu, and on it was her information. Number 23333 name, Ning age, 27 age, 27 EXP, 8,600, 8,600/10,000, soul value, 60 health value, 50 intelligence, 80 charm, 1 luck, 25, 3, spirit, 121 20 combat power, 10 potential, 24, 2, merit, 2 skills, 5 ring spear technique, trash fighting technique, trash peerless martial arts beginners trash honorary title, Goddess of War. When Ning Shu saw that she only had 1,500 points this time, she felt terrible. She had thought that she would be able to get rid of the title of Cannon Fodder Trainee and become an official player, losing the title of 2,333. However, the amount of points in this world was pitifully low. After calming down, Ning Shu thought for a while and understood why his points were so low. It was because the original Su Ran's request was to protect the Su family, but when the Su family was in trouble, she chose to stand aside and watch. So, from a certain point of view, there was a mission that was not completed. Forget it, the points were low. There are 5 points to distribute, please distribute them yourself, the system said. Ning Shu thought for a while and decided to add the points to his luck. Character was very important, and then add it to his soul. The stronger the soul, the better. Ning Shu finished adding the points, and the screen changed. Number 23333 name, Ning Shu age, 27 experience, 8,600, 8,600/10,000, soul value, 601 health value, 501 intelligence, 80 charm, 1 luck, 283 spirit, 120 strength, 10 talent, 26 merit, 2 skills, 5 ring spear technique, trash fighting technique, trash peerless martial arts beginners trash honorary title, Goddess of War host. Why don't you add a point to your charm? Your charm is too low and you only have 1 point, the system said. Ning Shu saw that his charm was only a lonely one. Ning Shu felt that he was being ridiculed by the system. Why did it only say something after she finished distributing the points? What are the benefits of charm? Ning Shu asked. Charm can make others have a good impression of the player, the system said concisely. Okay, it sounded like cheating, why didn't it say so earlier? Forget it, if I don't have charm, I'll just use violence to solve the problem. Ning Shu sat in the space and began to circulate his peerless martial arts. He began to absorb the matter in the space that could strengthen his soul. This time, Ning Shu felt that his soul was being consumed more than in the previous 2 worlds. That retard must have used a soul attack on me, causing my soul to become so dim. It's more tiring than fighting and killing. Ning Shu closed his eyes, relaxed his mind, and settled his thoughts. After an unknown amount of time, Ning Shu opened his eyes and saw that his soul had become a little stronger. There was an indescribable joy in his heart, and he shouted, "System, I want to enter the mission world." Wait, I want to ask what the next world is? Ning Shu didn't even finish his words when the world started to spin, and his whole body became unwell. By the time Ning Shu had almost completely fused with this body, before she opened her eyes, she felt someone kick her leg. It was neither light nor heavy, but it hurt quite a bit. Ning Shu opened his eyes and felt that the light was a little dazzling, so he used his hand to block it. "Hurry up and get up, how long are you going to sleep for?" a man said. Ning Shu put down the hand in front of his eyes, and only then did he see the man in front of him. He looked very ordinary, about 30 or 40 years old, and he was wearing a t-shirt with some dirty things on it. He was so ordinary that if he was thrown into a crowd, he wouldn't attract attention. However, Ning Shu's body tensed up, and he felt that the person in front of him was very dangerous. "Hurry up and eat, what are you dawdling for? You're the only one dawdling all the way here," the man said to Ning Shu in a bad mood. He walked in front and muttered, "I don't know why the officer called her here." Ning Shu followed behind the man. Now that he had just arrived in this world, and he hadn't accepted the plot, he was really confused. He looked around, and it seemed to be an abandoned factory. Ning Shu touched his waist, and he actually felt a gun. Suddenly, his heart was filled with a sense of security, at least he had something to protect his life. Ning Shu's nose twitched. She didn't know if it was her imagination, but she felt that the air was filled with a strange smell. When she breathed it into her lungs, it felt as if there was sand scraping against her lungs. There was a burning sensation, and when she looked at the sky from afar, she felt that the sky was always gray. Damn, he had a bad feeling. Chapter 91. Ning Shu followed the man in front of her into the room. There were 4 other people in the room. Seeing Ning Shu enter the room, they just glanced at her and continued eating. Ning Shu vaguely sensed that these people were very disdainful of her. "Eat something, you're still a child." The man who asked Ning Shu to eat before pushed a box of biscuits and a bottle of water in front of Ning Shu. Ning Shu thanked him and looked around the room. She found that there was another woman in the room. Her expression was very cold. She wore tight clothes that were convenient for movement, outlining her curvaceous figure. She was a cold and elegant woman. She secretly observed the other people and found another man. He was very handsome and had an unrestrained temperament. However, his eyes were cold. When he turned his head and met Ning Shu's eyes, Ning Shu felt cold all over. This person had a murderous aura towards her. Although this murderous aura was very subtle, Ning Shu still felt it. After looking around, except for a man and a woman who were very good-looking, the others were very ordinary. They were so ordinary that one would forget what they looked like after a glance. Ning Shu suddenly wanted to find a mirror to see what this body looked like. Could it be the same as the others, the same existence that set off these 2 people? What's the situation now? The feeling of not knowing anything is really bad. Ning Shu took a bite of the biscuit and almost broke her teeth. What kind of biscuit is so hard? Seeing that the others had finished eating the biscuits, Ning Shu didn't care whether the biscuits were hard or not. She mixed the biscuits with water and ate them all. Now Ning Shu just wanted to find a place to receive the plot. She was dumbfounded. Finished eating, finished eating. Let's plan which direction to go next, the handsome man said. His voice was unexpectedly fancy. How was it fancy? It was just that when he spoke, he had the feeling of a playboy, giving people a romantic feeling. Even so, Ning Shu felt that he was very dangerous. Ning Shu didn't say anything because she didn't know what to say. One of the men looked annoyed and dissatisfied. This lunatic can really run. Where did he go? Lunatic? What lunatic? Ning Shu was dumbfounded and didn't say anything. I think we should keep going forward. If we keep going forward, we'll reach the border. That's where the zombies haven't spread. Madman should have gone there, and he knows that the country is looking for him. The woman's attitude was very cold. Wait, zombies, zombies. Ning Shu only wanted to quickly receive the plot. While everyone was discussing, Ning Shu didn't say a word. However, the other 5 people didn't care at all. They ignored Ning Shu's existence. After the discussion, they all got into the off-road vehicle. Ning Shu also got into the car and asked the man sitting opposite him, "What lunatic? Hua, are you really stupid? Usually your brain isn't clear. Now you even forgot the mission after sleeping?" The man sitting opposite him said in a very bad tone. Ning Shu immediately closed her mouth. Hua, this body's name is Hua Duo? Forget it, I'll find a chance to receive the plot. Ning Shu looked out of the car for a while. It was clearly a highway, but there were almost no cars on the road. Along the way, there were no cars at all. After looking for a while, Ning Shu withdrew her gaze and meditated in the car. She wanted to see if she could cultivate peerless martial arts in this world. In any case, she had to have strength to complete the mission. After an unknown amount of time, Ning Shu's body finally had a trace of qi. This qi circulated in Ning Shu's body and constantly strengthened her body. Ning Shu was even a little surprised that this world could cultivate qi so early. One must know that when she was a little princess, she couldn't even cultivate qi for a month. When Ning Shu woke up, her stomach was growling, but there was nothing to eat. This feeling was too familiar. The body needed a lot of energy, so she was hungry. The problem was that there was nothing to eat. Ning Shu shamelessly asked the cold woman sitting next to her for 2 packets of biscuits. Under the disdainful eyes of everyone, she ate all the biscuits. At this time, a burst of inhuman roars came from afar. Then the air was filled with a rotten smell. Zombies, be careful. The driver's face was cold. The car didn't stop, but instead sped up. It directly hit the zombies in front and then ran over them. The car jolted a little. Ning Shu looked at the zombies outside the window and unconsciously roared. Their bodies were gray, and some parts were rotten. There were even maggots crawling on the rotten flesh. Their eyes looked like lime balls, gray and scary. Their movements were very slow, but the force they used to hit the window was very strong. With one hit, the window cracked. What kind of monsters are these? They obviously have no signs of life, but I don't know what kind of power is controlling these rotten corpses. It's so strange. The car drove very fast and soon they got rid of them. Ning Shu let out a sigh of relief. The atmosphere in the car was not as tense as before. Lone Wolf, find a place to rest. The woman said to the handsome man driving in front. The man smiled evilly at the woman. The man called Lone Wolf found an abandoned house. The house was very simple, but no one said anything. Ning Shu only had one feeling, and that was that he was very hungry. After casually eating something, Lone Wolf arranged for someone to keep watch at night. He probably saw that Ning Shu was just a little girl, so he didn't arrange for her to keep watch at night. There was one other person who received such treatment, and that was the beautiful woman. Ning Shu finally found the opportunity to accept the plot. Things started with a group of inhuman monsters rushing out of the laboratory. These monsters were very strong, and they couldn't feel pain. They didn't have any signs of life, but they had a very strong desire for human flesh. Moreover, they were very infectious. If they were caught and not dismembered, they would be assimilated into zombies. The virus carried by the zombies spread quickly, and the human world was on the verge of collapse. But now Ning Shu was even more devastated. Because the person who created these monsters was the genetic scientist, the school doctor uncle, who was codenamed Crazy. Uncle, you are so awesome. Is your family man-made? You turned a beautiful school world into a doomsday world. Uncle, why don't you go to heaven? This body was called Flower, and she was a member of the special agent team. She was only 17 years old, and this was her first mission in her life. Her mission was to find this crazy man and seize the gene fluid in his hands. It would be better if she could catch him. This gene fluid was the thing that created these monsters, but this gene fluid had a 50% chance of triggering the hidden superpower in the human body. But the school doctor uncle had long run away with the gene fluid. This group of people's mission was to find the crazy man who had run away. Ning Shu. Chapter 92. In addition to Flower, there were 5 other agents who had formed a team to look for Madman. The other 5 agents were all experienced agents of the country. It was the first time this body went on a mission and became a hindrance to the team. Therefore, the attitude of the team members towards Flower was very bad. In fact, Flower did not know that the agents in the team had already turned to codename Lone Wolf and Young Phoenix. They had already betrayed the country. After finding the gene fluid, they directly injected it. Moreover, the 5 of them awakened their abilities and built a base. At this time, more and more people were infected. The country also fell apart, and the bases rose one after another to resist the zombies. Flower was also killed the moment the team obtained the gene fluid. She was thrown into the zombie crowd and dismembered. She did not even have the chance to become a zombie. Well, this little girl could not even be considered a supporting female lead. She could only be considered a small cannon fodder, an insignificant cannon fodder. Then Lone Wolf and Young Phoenix should be the male and female leads. The other agents were ordinary, but Lone Wolf and Young Phoenix were capricious. The male lead was handsome and tall, while the female lead was cold and elegant. The original owner's wish was 1. To survive in this apocalyptic world. 2. To give the gene fluid to the country and not let Young Phoenix and Lone Wolf take it. Ning Shu looked at the two people's mission. He felt that it was easier than the previous missions. Easy myas. Snatching something from the male and female leads was not an ordinary difficulty. Ning Shu could also understand why the original owner wanted to give the gene fluid to the country. In fact, the original owner did not have the concept of a country. She only wanted to do it for the leader of the agent team. This leader raised her and trained her. She wanted to work hard to complete the mission to repay the leader's kindness. Well, he felt that this girl was quite naive and cute. She did not even know what was happening in the team. Why was it that every mission was so lousy? Moreover, the plot did not mention what happened to the mad scientist who caused the world to become like this. The team found the gene fluid in a simple laboratory. Fuck, it felt like the school doctor uncle was a transcendent existence. The scourge lived for 1,000 years. The uncle was going to go down in history forever and be infamous for 10,000 years. He directly changed the entire human world. A new favorite had appeared in the world. Then, the previous female lead, Ling Shui, was probably dead. Heaven and Earth's fate would choose a new favorite and redistribute fate. It was a sad story. Ning Shu wanted to cry. Mama, this world is so dangerous. Not only are there zombies, but there are also teammates who want to kill her. Hey, wake up. You've been sleeping all day. Ning Shu was kicked by someone. When he opened his eyes, the sky was already bright. Ning Shu looked at the man. This man's code name was Tarantula, and he was an expert in all kinds of firearms. At this moment, Tarantula looked at Ning Shu with an impatient expression. You are an agent. Don't you even have the most basic vigilance? You can sleep until dawn. People like you should be eaten by zombies. Ning Shu did not speak. His expression was as ignorant as usual as he followed Tarantula into the team. Today, they were eating hardtack again. Ning Shu did not care if he was used to it and finished everything because he was really hungry. Looking around, Ning Shu found that Lone Wolf and Young Phoenix were not in the team at all. He could not help but ask Tarantula, where did the captain go? The team leader was Lone Wolf, and Young Phoenix was not in the team. Ning Shu guessed very shamelessly that the two of them might have gone somewhere to have sex. Just take care of yourself. Why do you care about others? Tarantula said in a bad mood. The others also looked at Ning Shu as if they didn't care about her. Ning Shu was thinking in his heart. Should he directly leave the team and look for the gene fluid by himself? However, this plan was a bit risky. He had no supplies, no water, and no food. How could he walk there? If he really did that, it would be too late. Moreover, if he left the team so rashly, Lone Wolf and Young Phoenix would notice and end his life prematurely. Lone Wolf and Young Phoenix were decisive and ruthless people. Therefore, he still had to follow the team to find the gene fluid. In fact, Ning Shu still liked to face such male and female leads. He would rather face such people, at least with a normal brain, than face such people in the previous world. They were clearly the ones making trouble, but they insisted that others were being unreasonable. After breakfast, Ning Shu wanted to talk to these people, but no one paid attention to him. They wiped their pistols and sharpened their knives. In short, he was ignored. Ning Shu was speechless. Ning Shu gave up talking to these people. Ning Shu felt that the original owner was quite miserable. His strength was so bad that others did not even want to recruit him. It was also because the original owner had a one-track mind. He did not have any thoughts about the tempting gene fluid. All he wanted was to complete the mission. At this time, the door suddenly opened with a bang. Everyone looked up and saw Lone Wolf and young Phoenix almost crawling in. Both of them had a look of horror on their faces. Be alert. Lone Wolf's face was dignified as he stood in front of young Phoenix. Captain, what happened? Tarantula asked Lone Wolf, holding a gun in his hand and looking around vigilantly. Ning Shu pulled out his gun when the two people came in. He felt a strong pressure coming closer and closer. These two people must have provoked something. The protagonist had a constitution of accidents. When he provoked something he could not resist, he would be miserable. Those who died were all cannon fodder, but the protagonist was fine. Ning Shu's forehead was covered in cold sweat. A strong pressure almost crushed his heart. Everyone in the room had a very serious expression. Even young Phoenix, who had always been noble and cold, had a pale face. Ning Shu took a step back and silently hid behind the team. Lone Wolf in front looked at Ning Shu with disdain. Ning Shu did not care. He was the one who provoked them, so why did he have to look down on others? Just when everyone's nerves were high, a figure suddenly appeared at the door. It was so fast that no one could react. Ning Shu took the lead and fired a shot at the afterimage. Ning Shu was stunned for a moment, and a human figure appeared in front of her. In front of her was a magnified face with a pale face. At first glance, she knew that it was a zombie, but this zombie was not as rotten as the other zombies, and its movements were more flexible than the other zombies. This was an evolved variant zombie. Ning Shu turned around and ran away without thinking. She couldn't fight against this thing. The zombie was entangled by other people, so Ning Shu managed to escape the disaster. For a time, darts, hidden weapons, and bullets were thrown at the zombie, but what made everyone collapse was that the zombie dodged them one by one. Ning Shu's jaw dropped to the ground. The apocalypse had just begun, and suddenly such a powerful thing appeared? This kind of thing was simply a killing machine. At least for now, humans had no power to resist. Lone Wolf and young Phoenix were really good at it. Chapter 93. Roar, roar. The roar of the zombies came from afar, and it sounded like there were a lot of them. There was still a big guy in front of them that had not been dealt with, and now they were surrounded by zombies. Ning Shu looked at the zombies that were using all kinds of skills, but even bullets could not do anything to this zombie. It was really too fast. Ning Shu felt that the zombie's eyes were focused on her. It was a kind of naked desire for food. Fuck, this zombie wants to eat me? There were more and more zombies around, and the rotten smell made people want to vomit. Ning Shu shot the zombie that wanted to catch her, and looked at the zombie that was entangled by Lone Wolf. Ning Shu felt that this zombie was fighting with this team. Did Lone Wolf and young Phoenix provoke this zombie? Suddenly, Ning Shu's hair stood up, and a cold breath came from behind. Ning Shu did not think and dodged, rolling on the ground to avoid the zombie's attack. Ning Shu and young Phoenix shouted, "Did you take something?" Young Phoenix quickly shook her head. "No, I didn't." Ning Shu felt that something was wrong. Since she did not take anything, why did she fight to the death? "Everyone get in the car, get in the car." Lone Wolf shouted to the others, and took the lead to get in the car, and shouted to young Phoenix, "Get in the car, we can't deal with this zombie." Ning Shu quickly got in the car and slammed the door. Everyone was still in shock. Ning Shu gasped, looked around, and found that there was one less person in the car, one dead. There was a change in the plot, in the original plot, except for Ning Shu, the cannon fodder, who died. The others were fine, and finally awakened the ability. Young Phoenix tightly bit her lips, her face was pale, and she looked very nervous, excited, and worried. Ning Shu intuitively felt that young Phoenix was hiding something from them. Bang! Suddenly there was a loud noise on the roof. The mutated zombie was actually on the roof. Ning Shu had a very bad feeling. Hearing the loud sounds coming from the roof of the car, Ning Shu gripped the gun in his hand tightly. Ning Shu slammed on the brakes and accelerator, trying to get rid of the zombie on top of the car. The car was very bumpy, and Ning Shu almost vomited, but the zombie on top of the car was like a gecko. He couldn't get rid of it. Ning Shu turned around and saw a human head outside the car window. It was a gray-white zombie face. Ning Shu turned his head stiffly. What was going to happen now? The zombies were going against them. The sound on the roof of the car was still going on. There were cracks on the roof, and the sound was very loud. The windows were also shattered. Ning Shu fired a shot at the zombie's outstretched hand. The bullet grazed the gray palm and did not cause any damage to the zombie. Invulnerability. This was too abnormal. How was he supposed to fight? What are you doing? You will only anger him, young Phoenix, Ning Shu shouted. Now that the situation was like this, who cared about anger? Fuck, the car is out of gas, Lone Wolf, who was driving, shouted. Sure enough, the car stopped after a while. The zombie that had been on the roof of the car jumped down and aimed at young Phoenix's chest. Ning Shu was speechless. Was the zombie a pervert? Young Phoenix, who was attacked, turned pale. Facing the zombie's attack, she seemed to have lost the ability to resist. Her expression was blank. Young Phoenix, quickly dodge, Lone Wolf shouted at young Phoenix and fired at the zombie. Surprisingly, the zombie didn't attack young Phoenix. Instead, it pulled something out of her neck. Ning Shu held her gun and squinted at the thing in the zombie's hand. It was a glass bottle, and it shone brightly under the sunlight. The transparent liquid in the glass bottle was thicker than ordinary water. What was this? The zombies stole the gene fluid. Young Phoenix shouted. Everyone else was stunned. Gene fluid. Young Phoenix found the gene fluid? Ning Shu's expression was a bit strange. What did the zombie want the gene fluid for? There was no such thing in the plot. There's no time to explain. Anyway, we have to get the gene fluid back first, young Phoenix shouted. Seeing that the gene fluid was in its hands, the zombie did not bother with Ning Shu's group. It grabbed the gene fluid and planned to leave. Quickly stop it. We have to get the gene fluid, Lone Wolf shouted at the four people. Ning Shu rolled his eyes. It was obvious that they could not win. Why should they fight? However, Ning Shu's actions were not slow. Shooting at the zombie was useless. Shouldn't they be glad that the zombie did not want to kill them? The zombie seemed to be angered. It roared at the five people with a ferocious expression and rushed toward Ning Shu first. Ning Shu. Oh, was it because she looked weak that the zombies were charging at her? Ning Shu saw that the others were only blocking the zombie symbolically. They did not intend to help her at all. She could only save herself. A gray palm reached toward Ning Shu's neck. A rotten smell hit Ning Shu in the face. Ning Shu almost vomited. Ning Shu fired a shot at the zombie's head, but the zombie dodged. Looking at the zombie's claws getting closer and closer, Ning Shu's pupils shrank. Then, before she could react, the zombie's head in front of her suddenly exploded, splashing gray brain matter all over her face. Ning Shu! Not only was Ning Shu shocked, but the surrounding people were also shocked. The zombies' defense was not just for show. It was really hard for them to react when the zombie's head exploded. Ning Shu wiped her face. When she opened her eyes, she saw a car parked not far away. A man stood in front of the car. The man was wearing a black windbreaker. The wind blew the corners of his clothes, making it look elegant. He held a gun in his hand. The black muzzle was aimed at Ning Shu. Ning Shu was not scared to death by the zombie. Instead, she was scared to death by the gun. Even zombies could be taken care of. Ning Shu was scared to death by the gun. Thought. Ning Shu quickly waved her hand. We are all humans. Humans. Ning Shu did not expect to meet the school doctor in such a situation. The school doctor was still wearing that disgusting windbreaker. Ning Shu had experienced several worlds. Seeing the school doctor again felt like a lifetime had passed. Friend, thank you for your help. Lone Wolf said first. The school doctor looked at Lone Wolf indifferently. The black muzzle was still pointed at Ning Shu. Ning Shu's hair stood on end. Pick up the gene fluid on the ground. The school doctor said to Ning Shu. Can you move the gun away first? I'm scared, Ning Shu shouted at the school doctor. The school doctor sneered. Ning Shu hooked his finger. Come here quickly. Ning Shu pulled the zombie's hand away and walked towards the school doctor with the gene fluid. Little Phoenix wanted to walk over to Ning Shu, but was stopped by Ning Shu. Little Phoenix was not willing to give up. She looked at the gene fluid in Ning Shu's hand with a burning gaze. Ning Shu walked slowly towards the school doctor. The school doctor frowned. Don't come so close. You stink. Ning Shu. This fussy clean freak had not changed. Chapter 94. Ning Shu still wanted to express the excitement of meeting an old friend, but the school doctor's disdainful words extinguished the enthusiasm in her heart. It seemed like the school doctor didn't even know her. Ning Shu looked at the school doctor. He didn't look any different from before. He was still tall and sexy, giving people a feeling of abstinence. Especially when the gold-rimmed glasses reflected light, it was too fucking abstinent. Now, he pointed a gun at her with an indifferent face. Ning Shu felt scared. This was someone who killed the female lead and created the apocalypse. Ning Shu just wanted to say, "Please let him go." Lone Wolf and Young Phoenix clenched their fists, but they didn't dare to move. When Young Phoenix looked at Ning Shu, her eyes were filled with resentment. She seemed to resent Ning Shu for losing the gene fluid and giving it to someone else. The three sides confronted each other. Ning Shu's heart was like a group of dogs. Now, she was the target of two sides. If necessary, she would be the first to be killed. A gust of wind blew, and the breeze rolled up the school doctor's clothes. His clothes were fluttering, and his legs were so long. The wind brushed past Ning Shu's face. Ning Shu even smelled an elegant fragrance. It was probably the school doctor's fragrance. Ning Shu, this is the apocalypse. Why does the uncle have the leisure to use perfume? He doesn't feel guilty for what he did. Does he not feel guilty at all? Friend, put down your guns and let's talk. We are wasting time. It will be troublesome if the zombies are attracted. Lone Wolf said first. Ning Shu suddenly realized a problem. Lone Wolf and the agents didn't seem to know the school doctor. Wasn't the school doctor a wanted criminal? Didn't he even have a picture of him? This person was more valuable than the gene fluid. However, it seemed that the original owner didn't know what the genetic scientist with the code name Madman looked like. She just asked them to find the gene fluid. She probably didn't expect them to catch Madman. Uncle, you are so awesome. Do you have people in your family? Uncle, you are so evil. Do you have people in your family? Ning Shu's face trembled. When she looked up, she could see the black muzzle. She might as well lower her head and pretend not to see it. The school doctor heard Lone Wolf's words and nodded. Lone Wolf thought the person in front of him agreed, but the next sentence made Lone Wolf's handsome face stiffen. Wipe the brain matter off your hands and wipe the gene fluid bottle clean. Ning Shu said. Seeing Ning Shu raise his head with a face full of gray brain matter, he turned his head as if he couldn't bear it. Wipe your face too. At this time, why do you care so much? Ning Shu wiped her hands on her body twice, and then wiped the bottle of gene fluid clean. The gene fluid bottle was very small. It was almost the size of a penicillin bottle. There wasn't much gene fluid in it. When Ning Shu passed the bottle to the school doctor, Young Phoenix, who had been holding back, finally couldn't help but shoot at Ning Shu. Ning Shu had been guarding against Young Phoenix and Lone Wolf. When he saw Young Phoenix move, he activated his chi and ran behind the school doctor. He smelled the scent again. It was indeed the scent of the school doctor. It didn't smell like perfume at such a close distance. It was probably the smell after bathing. Why did it feel like the school doctor didn't live in the apocalypse? Young Phoenix was very confident in her shooting skills. This shot would definitely kill the stupid Hua. However, she didn't expect to hit a shadow. How could she be so fast? Seeing that her shot missed, Young Phoenix's cold face became colder. She pursed her lips tightly. The school doctor pointed his gun at Young Phoenix. Lone Wolf and the others were very nervous. 4 gun barrels pointed at the school doctor. The school doctor's face didn't change. Instead, the other party became more nervous. What's the situation now? Don't come near me. Stinks. In such a serious atmosphere, the school doctor suddenly said. It scared the others so much that they almost fired. Ning Shu was speechless. Now is not the time to talk about this. Uncle, let's run first. As soon as Ning Shu finished speaking, she felt terrible. This scene was so familiar. Why did the school doctor always do things that made people's hearts explode? The school doctor said, I feel like I've experienced something like this before. Roar, roar. The zombies that were shaken off caught up. The mutated zombie was already dead. These zombies seemed to have lost control. When they smelled the scent of humans, they roared even louder and more violently. Ugh. The most important thing now is to deal with the zombies. Let's work together to deal with the zombies. Lone Wolf pulled a long face. It showed that he was in an extremely bad mood. I've said it in advance. When dealing with zombies, no one is allowed to backstab. Ning Shu curled his lips. Anyway, he didn't believe a word that Lone Wolf said. The school doctor took the lead and blew off the head of the zombie in front. His speed was very fast. Everyone was stunned. Lone Wolf looked at the gun in his hand with a complicated expression. The latest gun. Ning Shu didn't know what the new gun was, but he felt that the gun in the school doctor's hand was very fast. The bullet speed was also very fast. When the bullet passed through the air, it created white smoke. Roar, these zombies didn't know fear. They only thirsted for human flesh. When the zombies in front fell, the ones behind came one after another. Ning Shu took out his gun to defend against the zombies. Soon, Ning Shu ran out of bullets. He grabbed a wooden stick from the ground and used all his strength to hit the zombie's head. Then the zombie's head exploded like a watermelon. The gray brain matter splashed on Ning Shu's face. The school doctor next to Ning Shu moved a few steps away and tightly pursed his lips. Ning Shu turned his head and saw that the school doctor was a little far away from him. He quickly chased after him. To be honest, Ning Shu would rather believe the school doctor than Lone Wolf and the others. One must know that young Phoenix wanted to kill her just now. The school doctor pulled out a gun from his waist and threw it to Ning Shu. Go away, you disgusted me. Ning Shu caught the gun in a flurry and shot at the zombie's head. The zombie's head exploded in an instant. There are too many zombies. Let's go first. Young Phoenix shouted with a sharp voice. Some of the zombies were tearing the mutated zombie's body. There would be more zombies later. Go, how can we go? The car is out of gas. Lone Wolf roared and shot a zombie. Then everyone's eyes moved to the school doctor. The school doctor didn't seem to notice everyone's gaze and patted the dust on his clothes. This friend. Lone Wolf just opened his mouth but was interrupted by the school doctor. Lone Wolf's face was livid. Seeing that there was going to be a big battle, the school doctor's indifferent look made people angry. Chapter 95. The team's car was out of gas, and after being tortured by the mutated zombies, it was basically scrapped. Therefore, everyone put all their hopes on the school doctor, but the school doctor firmly refused. The surrounding zombies were roaring, and the car was broken. Could it be that they could only rely on their legs to run? Everyone felt particularly miserable today. Ning Shu saw that the nearest zombie wanted to grab her, so she killed it with one shot. Her face was covered in brain matter, and she looked at the school doctor and said earnestly, "Uncle, let's run first." The school doctor looked straight ahead, but he didn't look at Ning Shu's face. "You stay away from me." Ning Shu, crying blind. Lone Wolf gave his team members a look and slowly moved towards the school doctor's car. The others pretended to fight zombies to cover Lone Wolf. Ning Shu saw that Lone Wolf was trying to pull the car door, and she was a little anxious. She didn't expect Lone Wolf to take her and the school doctor with him. These people were cruel and merciless, and they killed people for the country. Uncle, Ning Shu wanted to reach out and pull the school doctor's clothes, but the school doctor quickly dodged. Ning Shu anxiously said, "Uncle, they're going to take your car." Was it going to be the same as the plot, and get dismembered by the zombies? The school doctor suddenly reached out and grabbed Ning Shu's collar, making her stand in front of him. Ning Shu didn't have time to react, and then she saw a zombie not far away suddenly explode, and then the brain matter splattered on Ning Shu's face. Ning Shu, fuck this bitch. Ning Shu angrily turned around and saw that the school doctor had already left. She didn't have time to be angry and hurriedly followed him. Lone Wolf was still struggling with the car door, and even wanted to open the hood, but the car couldn't be opened. Young Phoenix and the others were anxious, and they didn't even want to deal with the zombies, so they came to help. Even after using all the skills of the Special Agent Agency, they still couldn't pry open the tortoiseshell out of the car. The school doctor took out the car key, and the car made a sound of unlocking. Lone Wolf thought that it would be a piece of cake to open the door and start the car when the car was unlocked. However, he felt something cold on his head. Lone Wolf didn't want to experience the taste of the gun. He raised his hand, his handsome face a little twisted. "This is a misunderstanding." Lone Wolf squeezed out the words from his throat. The school doctor snorted and took the lead to enter the car. Ning Shu shamelessly sat in the front passenger seat. Looking at the enclosed cars, Ning Shu suddenly felt very safe. Lone Wolf and the rest saw that the man who had appeared out of nowhere did not seem to want to take them away. Their faces were filled with anxiety as they tapped on the car window. Their mouths opened and closed, but they could not hear what they were saying. The soundproofing effect was amazing. The surrounding zombies surrounded them again. Gu Lang's heart was burning with anger. Damn it, there was no end to it. Young Phoenix tapped on the car window beside the school doctor. Her cold face was full of anxiety, and there was a trace of begging. The school doctor squinted at the woman. The car window was opened. Young Phoenix quickly grabbed the school doctor's clothes and shouted, "Please take us away, please." Young Phoenix looked at the school doctor pitifully. The school doctor looked at his clothes coldly and silently pressed the window button. The window immediately went up. Young Phoenix was afraid that her hand would be stuck, so she could only let go of the school doctor's clothes. She took back her hand and looked at the school doctor dumbfoundedly. "Isn't this a joke? If you don't want to, why did you open the window?" Only Ning Shu knew why. The school doctor's obsessive-compulsive disorder and mysophobia acted up. In comparison, Ning Shu found that the school doctor was more lenient to her. He only let the zombies splash her face with brain matter. The brain matter was not scary at all. Ning Shu looked at the school doctor. His side face was very cold. There was not even a speck of dust on his black coat. His legs looked especially long as he sat on the car seat. His whole body exuded a temperament of abstinence. Therefore, scientists and doctors were the most likely to be perverts. The school doctor had both identities. She did not know why he did not drive. Ning Shu looked at Gu Lang and the others outside. They were dealing with zombies while desperately tapping on the car window. This feeling was very good. "Who are those people outside?" The school doctor turned his head and asked Ning Shu. But then he immediately turned his head back and stretched out his slender fingers to take a piece of paper and threw it to Ning Shu. Ning Shu took the paper and wiped the brain matter on her face. "Who caused her to be like this? Who disliked her? I am the same as them. We are all agents of the country's special agent group." Ning Shu said honestly. The school doctor raised his eyebrows and looked at Ning Shu. "Agent." Cheat Ning Shu was speechless. From these 4 words, Ning Shu felt endless contempt and mockery from the school doctor. Not everyone could be as perverted as you. After experiencing 2 worlds, she realized that this guy had changed the course of human history and became the demon king of destruction. She was still a useless person. The corner of Ning Shu's mouth twitched as she silently wiped the brain matter off her face. When the people outside were about to die of exhaustion, the school doctor opened the car window. Young Phoenix, who had dealt with a zombie, immediately ran over. This time, she did not pull on the school doctor's clothes. Young Phoenix was panting and sweating. The sweat slid down her neck and then flowed to her white chest and into her deep cleavage. Ning Shu gulped a mouthful of saliva. The school doctor looked back at Ning Shu and said disdainfully, "Useless?" Ning Shu, oh, why couldn't she understand what the school doctor was referring to? "If you have any requests, just say it." Young Phoenix frowned. "We are out of bullets. Please save us." The school doctor asked with an indifferent face, "Anything?" The school doctor's sharp eyes swept across Young Phoenix's face. Young Phoenix's face paled and looked at Lone Wolf. Lone Wolf's face was very bad and he nodded at Young Phoenix. Young Phoenix took a deep breath and said, "Yes, please save us." The school doctor nodded and then said, "Oh right, my car is full of bombs. If I die, I can detonate the car before I die. Also, the windows are bulletproof. You can't get out if you come in." "But your sister." Lone Wolf and the others stiffened and quickly got into the car. The school doctor suddenly pulled out a gun from his waist and shot the forehead of the man sitting in the back. The man's face was full of shock before he died. What are you doing? What are you doing? Both Young Phoenix and Lone Wolf pointed their guns at the school doctor, while Tarantula pointed his gun at Ning Shu, forming a confrontation. Ning Shu, I didn't kill him, why are you pointing at me? Chapter 96. Ning Shu didn't understand why the uncle suddenly shot and killed people. If he didn't want to save them, why did he let them get in the car? She didn't understand. The school doctor withdrew his gun and frowned. Didn't you notice that he was bitten by a zombie? Push him out. Young Phoenix didn't believe him and began to check the dead companion. Finally, she found a claw wound on the arm and the flesh began to turn blue. Push him out. The school doctor said again. Young Phoenix gritted her teeth, opened the car door, kicked the person out and then slammed the door. The person who was kicked out was immediately dismembered by the zombies. The scene was really bloody. Everyone's expression was very complicated. Ning Shu asked the school doctor, how do you know he was hurt by a zombie? The school doctor looked at Ning Shu with contempt. Don't you smell the blood? Damn, she really didn't smell it. He was indeed an expert in dissection. He was so sensitive to the smell of blood. Lone Wolf, who was pointing his gun at Ning Shu, withdrew his gun. He sneered and said, even if that's the case, Flower's face is covered in zombie brain juice. She might also be infected. We should push her out. Damn, what kind of hatred did this guy have with her? The school doctor looked at Ning Shu. You're infected? No, I'm not infected. Ning Shu quickly waved his hand. A person who had mastered the peerless martial arts was in good health. What evidence do you have to prove that you're not infected? Tarantula laughed, making his ordinary face look sinister. Ning Shu curled his lips and said, what evidence do you have to prove that I'm infected? Hey, Tarantula. Young Phoenix said and then said to the school doctor, thank you for saving us. No need. The school doctor adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses. Ning Shu looked at him and inexplicably felt that the school doctor had some ulterior motive. Was he interested in the female lead? The school doctor stepped on the gas and got rid of the zombies behind. Not long after, he stopped and didn't seem to want to go anymore. Lone Wolf pulled a long face and asked in a deep voice, why don't you go? What are you doing here in the wilderness? Lone Wolf was extremely disgusted and repulsed by this person who had appeared out of nowhere. Ever since he met this person, Lone Wolf realized that his previous winning streak no longer existed. Even his position as the captain was threatened. The school doctor patted his clothes to get rid of the dust, as if he didn't hear Lone Wolf's words. Hey, what's with your attitude? I'm talking to you. Lone Wolf couldn't help but want to pull out his gun and kill this annoying person. Ning Shu realized that the school doctor was actually quite infuriating, so he asked, Uncle, why aren't we leaving? Zombies' sense of smell can only detect humans within 2 kilometers. The school doctor explained. Ning Shu was about to kneel down in front of the uncle and asked, how did you know? I've tested it before. I'm always interested in the unknown. The school doctor turned around and looked at Ning Shu. I've seen people as stupid as you. Ning Shu was speechless. Ning Shu laughed dryly and didn't answer. Lone Wolf fidgeted with his hair and said, even so, are we just going to stay here and wait for the zombies to catch up? Then run for 2 kilometers and wait for the zombies to catch up? The school doctor looked at Lone Wolf coldly, his gold-rimmed glasses glowing with a cold light. He said, if you mess with your hair again and make the car full of dust, I'll kill you. Lone Wolf's hand froze. He wanted to ignore him, but when he saw the gun on the man's waist, he finally put down his hand in annoyance. Ning Shu's mouth twitched. Uncle, you're exaggerating. Now is a special time. Survival is so difficult. Don't care about these trivial things. Seeing the man's strength, Young Phoenix and Tarantula didn't dare to speak. Young Phoenix held Lone Wolf's hand and asked him to bear with it. Lone Wolf was even angrier. Losing face in front of his woman was really damaging to his self-esteem as a man. By the way, I don't have any extra food for you, so you have to go back and find your own supplies. The school doctor said lightly. Everyone was speechless. After a while, everyone returned to the place where the battle took place. The zombies were gone, but the broken van was still there. Lone Wolf took the lead to get out of the car to check if the supplies were still there. Ning Shu also wanted to get out of the car to help, but he was stopped by the school doctor. You sit here. You'll only cause trouble if you go out. Ning Shu was speechless. However, Ning Shu did not get out of the car. She sat in the car with the school doctor. Moreover, Lone Wolf and the others wanted to kill her, so it was safer for her to stay with the school doctor. When she turned around, she saw that the school doctor's gaze was focused on young Phoenix, who was moving things. His gaze was sharp. Young Phoenix was a special agent, so her senses were very sharp. Naturally, she could feel that someone was looking at her, causing her muscles to tense up. This man's eyes were really sharp, so strong that it made people unable to breathe. Ning Shu asked, "Uncle, do you like young Phoenix?" The school doctor smiled faintly. His face looked a lot gentler, but Ning Shu felt that it was even more sinister. "I'm a little interested." The school doctor's slender fingers tapped on the steering wheel. Ning Shu had a feeling of wanting to mourn for young Phoenix. The school doctor once said to a female protagonist that he only wanted her. In the end, he was caught and used as a test subject. He said that he wanted to improve human genes and activate advanced human genes. Then, the world was ruined by the uncle. What did he mean by a little interested? Did he really like her, or did he want to dissect her? The school doctor supported his head with his hand and looked a little lazy. He looked at Ning Shu and asked, "Have we met somewhere before? Why do you call me uncle?" I'm used to calling him uncle. How should I put it? Admit that they were once in cahoots?" Just as Ning Shu was about to speak, a buzzing sound suddenly appeared in her mind. Then, a cold mechanical voice said, "Don't worry. Players can't expose their identity. Players are just passers-by. They can't break the rules of the world." She didn't plan to tell the school doctor. Otherwise, the school doctor would definitely dissect her. The school doctor raised his eyebrows and looked at Ning Shu. He snorted. "I'm 18 years old. Uncle, you're definitely older than me. I call you uncle because I respect you." Ning Shu casually came up with an excuse. This body was only 17 years old. The people in the car were chatting, but Lone Wolf and young Phoenix, who were moving things, had an argument. Lone Wolf didn't want to be with the school doctor anymore, but young Phoenix said that she still wanted to follow the school doctor. They should at least go their separate ways when they reached a safe place. Chapter 97. Young Phoenix's reason for insisting on following the school doctor was very good. This place was very desolate, close to the border, there was no one, and there were so many things. Did they have to rely on their 2 legs to walk? Besides, there were only 3 people left in the team, her, Lone Wolf, and Tarantula. Young Phoenix had subconsciously kicked Ning Shu out of the team. What if they encountered zombies? Carrying these things, could they outrun zombies? If they encountered a mutated zombie, they had no way to resist it. Lone Wolf knew that he was being unreasonable, but he inexplicably did not want to be with that man. That man gave him a very dangerous feeling, and his heart was very repulsed. But young Phoenix's reason was very good. The other man in the team, Tarantula, was also on young Phoenix's side. 2 against 1, Lone Wolf could only compromise. He pulled young Phoenix's hand and said, "Stay away from that man. I think he has bad intentions towards you. Don't be fooled." The school doctor, who was called a pervert, was calm and did not care about Lone Wolf's words. He was so calm that Ning Shu could not help but admire him. In fact, Ning Shu understood why Lone Wolf did not want to follow the school doctor. It was because the school doctor was too awesome. His light was too dazzling, overshadowing the brilliance of the male lead. What kind of person was the male lead? He was born to feel superior and had his own pride. How could he tolerate being inferior to others? But in the current situation, Lone Wolf could only endure the anger in his heart. He moved the things to the car while looking at the school doctor with resentful eyes. The school doctor silently looked at his fingernails and did not pay attention to him. Lone Wolf's handsome face was livid with anger. When the things were moved, the 3 people got on the car. Tarantula saw the leisurely Ning Shu and could not help but say, "Some people only know how to eat for free and don't know how to help. What did she do to offend this guy? He was always looking for trouble with her. Didn't you move up?" What does it matter if I'm there or not? Ning Shu was now relying on the school doctor's support. Wolf Spider raised his fist at Ning Shu. Then, he glanced at the school doctor in fear and mocked Ning Shu. You thought you found a big backer. Ning Shu had a smug look on his face. Tarantula, stop messing around. She then turned to the school doctor and said, Friend, where are you going next? Ning Shu did not know if it was his imagination, but when young Phoenix spoke to the school doctor, her voice sounded much softer. In fact, this was a normal phenomenon. For agents like them, in order to complete the mission, it was necessary to use their own advantages to take some necessary measures. For example, young Phoenix had a hot body and a beautiful and cold face. These were her advantages. Ning Shu looked at his own face in the rearview mirror. His face was covered in dust and dried brain matter. His facial features were ordinary and his hair was messy. One word, unsightly. Ning Shu glanced at the cool and elegant female lead and silently tidied his hair, smoothing out his messy hair. Oh my, she really did become the female lead's foil. There were only 2 women in the team, and her existence was the perfect foil for young Phoenix. He completely suspected that the original owner's existence was for this purpose. Bitter. Hearing young Phoenix's words, the school doctor raised his eyebrows and turned his head to look at young Phoenix. Young Phoenix almost imperceptibly straightened her chest and said, Where are you going? The school doctor adjusted the glasses on the bridge of his nose and asked, Where do you plan to go? I'll follow you. Hearing this, young Phoenix's face showed a smile, making her face even more beautiful. However, Lone Wolf's face was cold. Just like that, the school doctor joined the team. Young Phoenix went wherever she wanted to go. Lone Wolf was so angry that he pulled a long face all day long. When they met zombies, he would be the first to rush up and vent his anger on them. However, young Phoenix trusted the school doctor more and more. Every time Ning Shu saw the school doctor's cold eyes, his heart tightened. Especially when he saw young Phoenix face the school doctor with a little girl's attitude, Ning Shu was even more horrified. Uncle, you are going to counterattack and become the male lead's rhythm. The apocalypse was so realistic. In such an extreme environment, human nature would be magnified countless times. The primitive rule of human beings was the law of the jungle, and the strong would be respected. Worshipping the strong and submitting to the strong was an instinct. The uncle had advanced weapons in his hands, and he was fast and agile. Every time he faced zombies, he would not panic. What was even more valuable was that this man did not seem to be living in the apocalypse. Clean clothes, neatly trimmed nails, and there was not a speck of dirt on his body, which made him exceptionally charming. On the other hand, Lone Wolf was so angry that he slashed and stomped on zombies all day long. He did not have any elegance. His clothes were dirty, and his whole body smelled of sweat. With such a contrast, Lone Wolf was simply set in the mud, and the male lead's halo dimmed. However, what Ning Shu was more concerned about was the purpose of young Phoenix's group. They had been looking for the gene fluid for many days, but they did not find it. Ning Shu touched the gene fluid in his pocket. This gene fluid was taken from the mutated zombie. At that time, the school doctor found the bottle dirty, so Ning Shu put it away. However, after so long, the school doctor did not ask for it from her. Ning Shu naturally would not be stupid to give the gene fluid to the school doctor. Ning Shu had always been curious about the gene fluid. What was it that could make the world like this? According to the original owner's memory, the leader of the special agent group said that the country wanted to strengthen the body and improve the genes. The person in charge of this project was a genetic scientist with the code name Madman. However, he did not expect that the gene fluid would be developed. However, not everyone could be strengthened. There was a 50% chance of activating the high-level genes of the human body and awakening abilities. There was also a 50% chance of becoming a monster that did not feel pain, had infinite strength, and only had appetite. Moreover, the virus carried by the body could assimilate the human body into its own kind. The school doctor who created the situation ran away with the gene fluid, and the monsters in the laboratory rushed out, causing disaster to the world. The people in the laboratory who were lucky enough to awaken their abilities were recruited by the country. In order to recover the gene fluid that was taken away by the school doctor, Ning Shu's group was sent on a mission. Lone Wolf and Young Phoenix knew about the gene fluid's effect, so they betrayed the country and took the gene fluid. Uncle, you are really a sinner. What was the school doctor's purpose for following this team? Did he have a hobby of dissecting the female lead? Come here. The school doctor uncle waved at Ning Shu, as if he was teasing a puppy. Ning Shu walked over with a black face and asked, Uncle, what's the matter? Come, break the steel bar. The school doctor uncle pointed at Ning Shu's thumb-thick steel bar and said, Ning Shu, why? Chapter 98. Ning Shu heard that the school doctor wanted her to bend the steel bar. What kind of joke was this? Why do I have to bend the steel bar? Ning Shu asked. The school doctor looked at Ning Shu. His gold-rimmed glasses were glowing, and he looked like a monster. Ning Shu immediately picked up the steel bar on the ground. Use all your strength to bend it, the school doctor said. Ning Shu nodded. She used all her strength to bend the steel bar. It didn't break, but it bent. Ning Shu asked the school doctor, Is this okay? The school doctor nodded and reached out to touch Ning Shu's arm. Ning Shu threw down the steel bar and ran far away. She looked at him warily. Uncle, what are you doing? Damn, being touched by the uncle was so scary. I'm just testing your strength. I noticed that you're quite strong before. Ning Shu waved. Come here, let me touch you. Ning Shu. Come here, let me touch your muscles, the school doctor repeated. Ning Shu felt uncomfortable. She was strong because she had mastered the ultimate martial arts. Ning Shu felt ashamed every time she thought of the name of the secret manual. Ning Shu walked to the school doctor with small steps. When she saw the school doctor touching her body with a cold expression, Ning Shu felt cold all over. Why did she feel like she was going to be dissected by the school doctor? After touching her, the school doctor nodded. Although the muscles aren't big, they're quite tight. This is the ideal state. When the school doctor spoke, his gold-rimmed glasses reflected light. Ning Shu was so scared that she almost peed her pants. Was the school doctor going to dissect her? This is your dinner. Young Phoenix walked over and broke the affectionate gaze between Ning Shu and the school doctor. Young Phoenix held 2 boxes of hardtack and 2 bottles of water in her hands. She passed them to the school doctor. The school doctor passed a box of biscuits to Ning Shu. Ning Shu quickly took it. She was already hungry. When Young Phoenix saw this scene, her eyes flickered. Ning Shu said, Flower, come out for a moment. I have something to tell you. Ning Shu felt quite confused as to why Little Phoenix was looking for her. She followed Little Phoenix out of the house. This house was quite simple and crude, and it was made of mud. No one had lived here for a long time. This was the temporary resting place for the team. Young Phoenix stopped, and Ning Shu stood 2 meters away from Young Phoenix. This was the safest place for both of them. Ning Shu was on guard against Young Phoenix. Why are you looking for me? Ning Shu asked. Young Phoenix Ning Shu stretched out her white hand. Seeing Ning Shu's blank face, she said coldly, Flower, hand over the geno fluid. We can complete the mission. Gene fluid? I don't have the geno fluid. Ning Shu said. Young Phoenix's face turned cold. Don't play dumb. The geno fluid was stolen by the mutated zombies. It ended up in your hands. Ning Shu suddenly realized something and said, That geno fluid, I don't know where it is. If you didn't mention it, I would have forgotten about it. Then, Ning Shu made a guilty face. Sister Young Phoenix, it's all my fault. Young Phoenix was unhappy when Ning Shu called her sister. Seeing that the other party was so stubborn, she said coldly, Flower, we are all from the Special Agent Group. Do you want to see us fail the mission and be punished by the officer? Ning Shu rolled her eyes. You all betrayed the country. Why do you care about punishment? These words were just to coax the original owner. Ning Shu cried and anxiously said, What should I do? I really lost the geno fluid. The situation was so dangerous and there were zombies. I didn't even notice where I lost it. Young Phoenix was speechless because of Ning Shu. She coldly snorted and turned away. Ning Shu curled his lips and finally went back to the house to eat dinner. Eating biscuits every day, Ning Shu was about to vomit. But these things were easy to carry and not easy to spoil. They were the best choice. The school doctor didn't know where he got the milk. He was drinking it when he saw Ning Shu come in. He asked, "Why is she looking for you?" Ning Shu's eyes turned. He was thinking if he should tell the truth. If he told him about the Geno fluid, wouldn't it remind him? What if he wanted to go back? In the end, Ning Shu told the truth. "She asked me about the Geno fluid." The school doctor didn't say anything. He drank the milk and didn't ask Ning Shu for it. Ning Shu was a little touched. "Uncle, you are really a good person. Although you are a pervert." Young Phoenix, who just left, came back. This time, not only Young Phoenix came, but also Lone Wolf and Tarantula. Walking into the house, Lone Wolf coldly snorted. He looked at the school doctor with hostility. His handsome face was a little decadent. He didn't look like the future overlord of the base. Everyone was sitting at a simple table. Lone Wolf, who was sitting at the head of the table, coughed. He tried to show a little momentum. It looked like he was bluffing. "Young Phoenix, you say it?" Lone Wolf said to Young Phoenix. He really didn't want to talk to this man. Seeing this man, Lone Wolf felt suffocated. This team was actually divided into two teams. One was Lone Wolf, Young Phoenix, and Tarantula. The other team was Ning Shu and the school doctor. The relationship between the two teams depended on Young Phoenix. "Do you know what we are going to do?" Young Phoenix asked the school doctor. The school doctor drank a mouthful of milk and didn't speak. Young Phoenix seemed to understand the school doctor's personality and said, "We are going to find the Geno fluid." Everyone looked at the school doctor. The school doctor didn't have any expression. Young Phoenix was a little frustrated. This man was really difficult. She had encountered many missions, but she had never met a man like him who was indifferent to her. This Geno fluid can stimulate people's abilities and strengthen the body. Now that there are more and more zombies, human survival is getting more and more difficult. Finding the Geno fluid can stimulate more ability users to deal with zombies. Young Phoenix said with a serious face. The school doctor finally finished his milk and stuffed the unfinished biscuits into Ning Shu's arms. Ning Shu silently ate the biscuits left by the school doctor. "If you are looking for the Geno fluid, you don't have to. The Geno fluid is half finished, and Madman is dead," the school doctor said lightly. Puff, cough, cough. Ning Shu, who was eating the biscuits, choked and quickly drank water. Hearing the school doctor say that Madman was dead, he said indifferently that he was dead. What was the school doctor trying to do? Fake death to give the wrong information that Madman was dead? Lone Wolf frowned and coldly asked the school doctor, "How do you know? How do you know that Madman is dead?" "For you. You are the most mysterious person in this team. You don't even have a name." Even Young Phoenix's face showed suspicion and asked, "How do you know that Madman is dead?" "I killed Madman," the school doctor said lightly with a look of pity on his face. "He destroyed the Geno fluid." Puff, cough, cough. Ning Shu choked again and hammered his chest. Chapter 99. Listening to the school doctor's nonsense with a straight face, Ning Shu felt uncomfortable. This made Ning Shu, the only one who knew his identity, feel itchy in her heart. She really wanted to say that this guy was crazy. How could he kill a crazy person? Suicide? The school doctor raised his eyebrows and looked at Ning Shu. Seeing her rolling her eyes, he reached out his hand and patted Ning Shu's back. He said faintly, "Such a big reaction. Do you have a problem?" Ning Shu waved her hand and said, "I don't have any problem." What problem could she have? Seeing the school doctor's cold face, she didn't dare to say anything even if she had a problem. The person who got rid of the gene fluid has the nerve to stay here. How thick-skinned. Don't you feel guilty at all? Young Phoenix retorted. Because of you, many people have been killed and infected by zombies. Ning Shu. Listening to Young Phoenix's accusation, Ning Shu reflexively looked at the school doctor. Those words should be directed at the school doctor. The person who created the zombies should feel guilty. Seeing Ning Shu staring at him, the school doctor shrugged and said, "I didn't lose the gene fluid. It's useless for you to look at me." Ning Shu. Once again, her understanding of the school doctor was refreshed. The school doctor's face was one of the thickest in the world. Flower, I'm talking to you. Where did you lose the gene fluid? Do you know how important it is? Young Phoenix asked Ning Shu calmly. Ning Shu rolled her eyes. I didn't even remember where I lost it. There were so many zombies. I didn't even have time to deal with the zombies. How could I remember the gene fluid? Even if you lose your life, you should protect the gene fluid. Young Phoenix accused Ning Shu. Damn, there was no end to this. Ning Shu slammed the table, and suddenly the shabby table completely fell apart. Young Phoenix, do you want to fight with me? Although the young Phoenix did not like her before, it maintained a noble and cold attitude, unlike now when it was fighting with her and trying to suppress her. Ning Shu looked at the unperturbed school doctor uncle. Could it be that the female lead was jealous because she was close to the uncle? Little Flower, I'm not going to argue with you because you're young. Are you done yet? Do you think you're going to be so arrogant just because you have someone backing you up? Young Phoenix said coldly. She looked at the school doctor with resentment in her eyes. Hua Duo did not have a good figure. In terms of looks, compared to her, Hua Duo was simply ugly. Why did this man want to be close to Hua Duo instead of her? Thinking of this, the young Phoenix's expression became even more bitter. Lone Wolf saw the resentful look on young Phoenix's face, and his face turned ugly. He shouted, "What are you arguing about?" Now was the time to plan where to go next, not to argue about such details. Young Phoenix said, "Without the gene fluid, it's useless to say anything." Lone Wolf looked at the school doctor with a complicated expression. Finally, he said, "Since Madman is dead and the gene fluid has been destroyed, let's go back." Lone Wolf's meaning was obvious. He was not going to carry out any more missions and was ready to go back. Ning Shu did not have any objections. Anyway, the gene fluid was in her hands. When she went back and handed it to the head of the special agent group, her mission would be considered completed. Then, she would have to think about survival. However, she could not show that she wanted to go back. Ning Shu said listlessly, "If we go back like this, we won't get anything. We'll be punished." Young Phoenix rolled her eyes at Ning Shu. Who is this all because of? Anyway, it's not because of her, Ning Shu said silently in her heart. In the end, the team unanimously agreed to go back. Now that there was no gene fluid, and Lone Wolf and Young Phoenix had not awakened their superpowers, they naturally needed the power of the country to protect themselves. For the time being, they did not want to betray them. The atmosphere suddenly became silent. Lone Wolf snorted and took the lead to leave. He glanced at Ning Shu with impatience and killing intent in his eyes. Ning Shu leaned against the school doctor. The school doctor's cold eyes met Lone Wolf's. Lone Wolf snorted and turned to leave. Flatterer. Tarantula mocked Ning Shu. The school doctor turned his head. Ning Shu sneered. Your teammates? Why is your character so bad? Ning Shu, who knows? You're quite strong. Is it natural? The school doctor asked Ning Shu as he adjusted his glasses. His eyes reflected the light, giving people a dangerous feeling. How should he answer this question? Why did he feel that the school doctor was up to no good? Uncle loved to dissect and study talented people. Ning Shu grinned at the school doctor and said, "Uncle, I was born this way." The school doctor did not say anything else. Ning Shu waved his hand, and Ning Shu immediately moved in front of the school doctor. "Don't get so close," the school doctor said. Ning Shu curled his lips and took 2 steps back. When will the school doctor change his bad habit? The gene fluid is on you. Have you ever thought about awakening your superpower? The school doctor asked Ning Shu. Ning Shu almost jumped up. Seeing the school doctor's indifferent face, he gave up quibbling. He shook his head and said, "I don't want to." "But your teammates all want to get the gene fluid to awaken their superpower?" The school doctor raised his eyebrows and looked at Ning Shu. "Are you afraid of becoming a zombie?" To be honest, this 50% probability was really bad. You either become a superpower user or a zombie that only knows how to eat human flesh. Ning Shu quickly nodded. "I'm afraid of becoming a zombie." The school doctor's expression was very disdainful. "You don't even dare to try the 50% probability. Useless. What's the use of trash like you?" Ning Shu heard the disdain in the school doctor's voice. Ning Shu said, "You can laugh as much as you want. I still need this gene fluid to complete the mission." Ning Shu sat next to the school doctor and asked, "Uncle, where do you think this gene fluid came from?" Ning Shu had always been curious about how this gene fluid came about. The school doctor faintly glanced at Ning Shu. "Why are you so close to me when you want to talk? These bitches are so pretentious." Ning Shu moved to the side. Ning Shu didn't expect the school doctor to be able to answer her question. The school doctor was just so capricious. The school doctor adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses and said, "In fact, supernatural abilities are the same as the cultivation in the legends. They both have attributes. The so-called spiritual root is actually a high-level gene. This gene fluid was actually experimented on by a madman from a woman. He extracted the high-level gene fragments from her body. Some people failed to activate it because they couldn't match the genes in the gene fluid. Instead, their genes were messed up and they became monsters. However, some people could match the high-level genes in the gene fluid and activate the hidden high-level genes in their bodies." Ning Shu, "Oh, uncle, are you crazy? Is your family made?" The woman the uncle was talking about was the female lead of the school world, Semaida. The female lead was treated like this. She was definitely the most aggrieved female lead in history. She was probably dead by now. Chapter 100. Originally, they were going to look for the gene fluid, but after such a long time, they still couldn't find the gene fluid. The team was already disheartened, and the school doctor said that Madman was dead, so there was no more gene fluid. Thus, they decided to go back. More importantly, they encountered more and more zombies on the road, and there were more and more mutated zombies. So far, they had encountered 3 mutated zombies, and these mutated zombies could summon other zombies. The team was struggling to deal with these mutated zombies, so the decision to go back was basically unanimous. But what Ning Shu couldn't figure out was why the uncle followed them back. Was he walking into a trap? "Flower, get up." The school doctor used his foot to nudge Ning Shu. Ning Shu opened her eyes, rubbed her eyes, and followed the school doctor into the car. Young Phoenix originally wanted to sit in the front passenger seat, but Ning Shu took the seat first. Young Phoenix stared at her and sat in the back. Along the way, Ning Shu felt a chill on the back of her head. Needless to say, this was young Phoenix's gaze. Ning Shu was now sure that young Phoenix's attention had shifted to the uncle, and Ning Shu heard young Phoenix and Lone Wolf arguing more than once. Anyway, it was about whether or not he would betray her, and then young Phoenix would quibble, and there was no blah blah blah. But the school doctor, as the person involved, was indifferent as if nothing had happened, and he did what he should do. This made Lone Wolf gnash his teeth, and wanted to kill the uncle more than once. Ning Shu certainly didn't want anything to happen to the uncle. Once the uncle was in trouble, she would also be in trouble. Didn't he see Lone Wolf's eyes looking at her with killing intent? The school doctor who was driving the car didn't look good, and said faintly, "There are zombies again." The atmosphere in the car suddenly became tense. "Damn, is there an end to this?" Tarantula cursed. Along the way, they had encountered countless zombies. Everyone had a feeling that there were only a few of them left in the world. They really didn't see a single person. How did the zombies survive? They were running out of supplies and ammunition. Ning Shu was now killing zombies with an axe and a stick. The only person in the group who had a gun was the school doctor, but he didn't have any intention of leaving. At most, he would help Ning Shu when he was about to be bitten by zombies. Towards the others, it didn't matter if they were there or not. The school doctor said that there were zombies coming. Sure enough, it didn't take long before they heard the roars of zombies. There were zombies around the car trying to surround it. The school doctor's face was cold. He stepped on the accelerator and directly rushed to the zombies in front of the car, and then mercilessly ran over them. Ning Shu was about to throw up from the bumpy ride. Dong! A loud sound came from the roof of the car, and then the whole car shook twice. Everyone's face turned ugly as they encountered another mutated zombie. Why are there so many mutated zombies? Ning Shu looked at the school doctor uncle. The uncle's face was calm and indifferent, but his tightly pursed lips showed that he was in a bad mood. Ning Shu said to the school doctor uncle, "Uncle, why don't we get off the car and kill the mutated zombies?" "Flower, don't talk nonsense if you don't have a brain. There are so many zombies outside. If we go out, we will be surrounded by zombies. There are also mutated zombies. You want everyone to die," young Phoenix said with a cold face. Lone Wolf and Tarantula looked at Ning Shu with an unfriendly face. Ning Shu frowned and said, "Now the mutated zombies are on top. What if they break the car? Without the car, we will be torn apart by the zombies in minutes." Did they really think that she was willing to get off the car and face the zombies? Bang bang. The mutated zombies on the roof of the car kept the roof down. The uncle's car was relatively sturdy, so there was no problem for the time being. The uncle madly stepped on the gas pedal to get rid of the low-level zombies. Then he stopped the car and said to the people in the car, "Get off the car and kill this zombie." Everyone had no choice but to get off the car first. They madly fired at the zombies on top of the car, but the zombies were not harmed. Everyone's face showed a helpless look. The gap between the two sides was too big. Ning Shu held the gun and shot at the zombies, but the zombies dodged. Damn, where did these mutated zombies come from? The school doctor uncle narrowed his eyes and aimed at the zombies, but he did not shoot. It was estimated that the zombies' speed was too fast. Lone Wolf threw away the gun in his hand and directly used a hidden weapon, but it was useless. Instead, the zombies got close to him and were about to take out his heart. "Lone Wolf!" young Phoenix screamed. "Quickly shoot!" Lone Wolf rolled on the ground to avoid the zombies' attack and shouted at the school doctor uncle. Tarantula and young Phoenix went up to help, but the zombies seemed to be targeting Lone Wolf. They must kill the male lead first. The school doctor uncle did not shoot. He kept aiming but did not shoot. It was estimated that he was looking for an opportunity. The zombies attacked Lone Wolf again. This time, Lone Wolf was one step slower and did not dodge the zombies' attack. Seeing that Lone Wolf was about to be killed by the zombies, suddenly, Lone Wolf's hand burst out a lightning-like light and hit the zombie's body. The zombie's body immediately emitted white smoke. The mutated zombie was stunned. Apparently, it was shocked by the scene in front of it. Its gray face showed fear. Everyone was stunned as they stared blankly at Lone Wolf's hand. Even Lone Wolf had a blank look on his face. Then ecstasy filled his face as he muttered, "This is a superpower, a superpower." Taking advantage of the zombie's blank space, the school doctor uncle pulled the trigger and exploded the zombie's head. Although the school doctor uncle killed the zombie, it made Lone Wolf's heart full of anger. He asked the school doctor uncle, "Why didn't you shoot just now?" Lone Wolf looked at the school doctor uncle with a malicious face. His hand was still releasing the lightning power. Apparently, he wanted to kill the school doctor uncle. Ning Shu was very nervous. He said to Lone Wolf, "Uncle gave a lot of thought to let you awaken your special ability in a critical moment." Sure enough, he was beloved. He actually awakened the lightning power to restrain zombies. The lightning power was the most harmful to zombies. Lone Wolf heard Ning Shu's sophistry and sneered, "If I didn't awaken my special ability in a critical moment, I'm afraid I would have been killed by the zombies. I will not spare this guy." Ning Shu could see that now that Lone Wolf had the ability, he wanted to take revenge and establish absolute prestige in the team. Lone Wolf's hand flashed with lightning. His face was full of eagerness. Apparently, he wanted to kill the school doctor uncle. The school doctor uncle raised his gun and pointed it at Lone Wolf's forehead. He sneered, "You're just a beginner with special abilities. Let's see if you're faster than my bullets." Lone Wolf's face trembled. He looked at the black muzzle and then looked at the school doctor uncle's indifferent face. He unwillingly withdrew his special ability. Chapter 101. After Lone Wolf activated his ability, he looked refreshed. His whole body was surrounded by a domineering aura, as if he had control of the whole world. Ning Shu couldn't help but ridicule him in her heart. Looking at Lone Wolf's appearance, he seemed to want to snatch the car, leave her and the uncle behind, and run away. However, he was very afraid of the gun in the uncle's hand, but his attitude was high and mighty. He gave her and the uncle less food to eat, which made Ning Shu despise him. Ning Shu was worried for the uncle. Now, she and the uncle were in the same boat. The team continued to walk back. On the way, they encountered a lot of zombies. Lone Wolf killed them all and became more proficient in using his lightning ability. During a zombie siege, young Phoenix also awakened her ability, and it was an ice ability. Not long after, Tarantula also awakened his earth ability. Among the 5 people, only Ning Shu and the school doctor hadn't awakened their abilities. They felt like the 2 of them were the odd ones out. Ning Shu didn't know why she couldn't activate her ability, but her strength was getting stronger and her body was getting lighter and lighter. Obviously, it was due to her peerless martial arts. If she didn't have an ability, then so be it. Ning Shu comforted the school doctor and said, "It's okay, uncle. You will awaken your ability one day." The school doctor rolled his eyes at Ning Shu and sneered, "You should worry about yourself. Don't get killed by these people." Ning Shu sighed. The school doctor could defeat everyone with his weapon. If she had a whip in her hand, then her lethality would be greater. "Uncle, why don't we just run away and not stay with these people?" Ning Shu whispered in the school doctor's ear. Ning Shu's hot breath blew on the school doctor's ear. The uncle's ear moved and moved to the side. "I hate it when you get so close. Can't we talk properly?" Ning Shu's face collapsed. "Uncle, we are discussing important things. Don't worry about these details." "Oh," the uncle said. "But now the other 3 have awakened their abilities. It's because they've all awakened that we have to run." Ning Shu said anxiously, "The 2 of us can't beat them." The uncle refused. Ning Shu opened his eyes wide and asked, "Why?" "These are 3 good materials," the uncle said. Ning Shu, what did the uncle mean by this? Was he going to dissect those 3 people like a madman? Ning Shu really wanted to shake the uncle's body and beg him to give up such a ridiculous idea. "Here, this is your dinner." Young Phoenix threw a box of biscuits and a bottle of water on the ground in front of the school doctor and Ning Shu. The water bottle and the biscuit bag were covered with dust. Fortunately, they were still unopened. Otherwise, how could anyone eat them? Ning Shu's mouth twitched. Previously, young Phoenix was still a little interested in the school doctor, but after Lone Wolf and she awakened their abilities, her attitude changed. The female lead probably felt that only the strong were worthy of her. Besides, she was also a strong person. The uncle without any abilities really had no advantage. Young Phoenix threw the things down and left, leaving the 2 of them with a noble and cold back view. The uncle held his glasses and raised his eyebrows as he looked at young Phoenix's back. Ning Shu picked up the biscuits and water bottle on the ground, patted the dust on them, and said to the uncle, "Don't look, she doesn't like you now." The apocalypse was reality. The school doctor didn't say anything. He supported his chin with his hand and looked at Ning Shu. His expression was very lazy, and he said indifferently, "I don't understand what you are talking about." Ning Shu snorted and pretended to be innocent. He didn't believe that the uncle didn't know that young Phoenix was interested in him before. Ning Shu tore open the biscuits, wrung out the water bottle, and handed it to the uncle. He said, "Uncle, eat first. Leave some for me." The uncle took the water bottle, drank a mouthful of water, ate some biscuits, and then gave the water bottle to Ning Shu. Ning Shu didn't avoid the uncle's leftover water and ate the biscuits. The school doctor saw that Ning Shu was enjoying the biscuits and sneered. He said, "Eating my leftovers, do you have to be so happy?" Cough cough. Ning Shu hit his chest. Damn, he choked again. Who the hell liked to eat other people's leftovers? It was the uncle's fastidious habit that really made people's balls hurt. If she ate first, the uncle wouldn't even touch it, but young Phoenix only gave them so little to eat. She didn't mind as long as they could eat their fill. She was despised by the school doctor again. The school doctor reached out his hand and patted Ning Shu's back. He seemed to feel that Ning Shu's back was a little dirty. Then he wiped the dust off his hand on Ning Shu's body and withdrew his hand. Ning Shu was speechless. The next morning, young Phoenix came to inform the school doctor and Ning Shu that they were ready to leave. The school doctor was still the driver. Lone Wolf and the others were already waiting in the car. Their faces were long and they were in an extremely bad mood. The reason why Lone Wolf didn't do anything to the school doctor was that they couldn't drive the car. The most terrifying thing was the bomb that the school doctor mentioned. Lone Wolf looked at the school doctor and Ning Shu. So when he faced Ning Shu and the school doctor, his face was full of disdain and arrogance. It was as if letting them live was a great gift. Ning Shu directly ignored Lone Wolf's expression and turned a deaf ear to Tarantula's ridicule. Her skin was extremely thick. Along the way, they encountered a lot of zombies. Finally, they reached the city. It wasn't as desolate as before. The group passed by a city and found that there was no one in the city except for zombies. Originally, they wanted to find some food but found that the supermarket was basically empty. This gave people a very bad feeling. Ning Shu thought that the country had collapsed and all the people were gathered in the base. Fuck, the country was gone. Who should she give the gene fluid to? Ning Shu was deeply depressed. It was already late. The group found a small district to stay in. Some of the wandering zombies in the corridor were killed by them. Ning Shu turned on the tap. There was water, but she didn't know if it was drinkable. Forget it, it was better not to drink. The virus had destroyed the whole world. Even the water source had become muddy. Ning Shu looked at the school doctor. This was really a sin. Uncle? Ning Shu shouted. The school doctor looked at Ning Shu indifferently. What's the matter? Ning Shu grabbed the school doctor's hand and earnestly said, Uncle, you should give up on young Phoenix. The two of us should run away. There are a lot of abandoned cars in the city. Lone Wolf doesn't need you anymore. Didn't he see that after entering the city, Lone Wolf looked at her and the school doctor's eyes with undisguised killing intent? It was already like this and the uncle was still thinking about young Phoenix. The school doctor looked down at his hand that was held by Ning Shu. He pulled his hand back and said, Your hand is so dirty. Wash it. Ning Shu wailed, Uncle. Chapter 102. The thing that made Ning Shu the most speechless was that she was clearly telling the uncle a very serious matter, but the uncle always made Ning Shu very angry. Uncle? Ning Shu shouted weakly, I'm worried to death, Uncle. The school doctor looked at Ning Shu with his chin in his hand. Looking at her twisted face, he said lazily, I don't know why you're so grumpy all day. Girl, can't you be good? Ning Shu was speechless. Damn, the uncle still despised her? The team continued to move forward and finally found a base where humans were gathered. There were many people gathered at the entrance of the base. After walking for so long, they suddenly saw so many people and felt so excited. Ning Shu followed behind the school doctor and waited at the entrance to enter the base. The first thing they did when they entered the base was to take a shower. Lone Wolf and young Phoenix were in front of the line. The people at the base registration looked at the others with a superior look. When it was Lone Wolf's turn, they asked, What's your name? How old are you? Have you awakened your ability? Lone Wolf didn't say anything. Lightning flashed in his hands, and crackling sounds could be heard. The scene looked particularly cool. Lightning ability, it's actually a lightning ability. The person at the registration stood up and looked at the ability in Lone Wolf's hand excitedly. His face became respectful and asked, May I ask, what's your name? So that the base can arrange a place for you to live. The surrounding people looked at Lone Wolf with envy, jealousy, and hatred. Ability users had better resources and a better quality of life. Those who didn't awaken their abilities could only be inferior people. Their lives were very difficult and they could only do some dirty work in the base. Lone Wolf, 28 years old, lightning ability. Lone Wolf said indifferently, looking particularly noble and cold. Next was young Phoenix. Her ice ability also caused a commotion. Tarantula got his room key and the wood ability of Tarantula. Tarantula got his room key and turned his head to Ning Shu and made a throat-slitting gesture. Ning Shu shot a glance at the Tarantula. She didn't know what she had done to offend this guy to make him hate her so much. When it was the school doctor's turn, Ning Shu had always wanted to know his name. The registrar looked at him and asked, What's your name? What's your superpower? Lunatic, the school doctor said. Cough cough. Ning Shu hammered his chest. How could he say his code name so bluntly? The registrar obviously didn't know who Madman was. When he heard the name, he coldly looked at the uncle and said, I'm talking about the name. Your name is Madman? The school doctor answered with a serious face. What special ability? The school doctor shook his head. No superpower. If you don't have a special ability, then you're an inferior person, the registrar said coldly. The school doctor stood aside and waited for Ning Shu. When it was Ning Shu's turn, Ning Shu said directly, Little flower, no superpower. The registrar shook his head and said disappointedly, another inferior person. Ning Shu was speechless. Ning Shu walked to the school doctor's side and asked, Uncle, what should we do now? We're inferior people. We don't even have a place to live. It was good enough that the base could take them in. They would only give them some simple things or live in a shabby house with many people. Lone Wolf and Young Phoenix had already left. They had better accommodation and supplies. But Ning Shu and the uncle were more miserable. The uncle didn't care and walked into the base. Ning Shu hurriedly followed behind him. Wait for me here. I have something to do. Wait for me here. Don't run around. Wait for me to come back. The school doctor said to Ning Shu and turned to leave. Ning Shu obediently waited for the uncle to come back. Then she observed the surrounding environment. The people who passed by her were in two states. One was dead and lifeless. Their faces were gray, as if they could not see any future. They were like walking corpses. One type was people who exuded a powerful aura. Half of these people had awakened their special abilities, and their faces were filled with complacency. These people who had awakened their special abilities looked at Ning Shu. They were sizing up Ning Shu as if to determine whether he was the same kind or inferior. Little flower? A puzzled voice sounded. Ning Shu turned and saw a man in military uniform walking over. He looked at Ning Shu and said with surprise, You're still alive? Ning Shu knew from the original owner's memory that this middle-aged man in military uniform was the officer of the special agent team. When Ning Shu saw the officer, he was surprised and surprised. He saluted him. Where are the others? The officer looked at Little Flower. Ning Shu said, Lone Wolf and the others have returned. 2 people were sacrificed. The officer looked at Ning Shu with a rare kindness in his eyes. He sighed and said, Not long after you left, the country also collapsed. Ning Shu didn't know what to say. He thought about it and gave the gene fluid to the officer. This is the gene fluid I got. Lone Wolf and the others don't know about it. The officer shook his head and said, Keep this gene fluid. Have you awakened your special ability? Now that humans can awaken their special abilities, the gene fluid doesn't have much use. If you haven't awakened your special ability, use the gene fluid. The officer looked melancholy. The apocalypse is cruel. You have to protect yourself. When Ning Shu heard this, she sighed in her heart. This man had taken the original owner out of the orphanage, raised her up, and taught her skills. In the original owner's heart, he was probably the most important person in her life. Sir, this gene fluid is for you. This is Little Flower's first mission. Little Flower wants to complete the mission given by you. Ning Shu said seriously and gave the gene fluid to the officer. The officer didn't say anything. He took the gene fluid and asked, Do you have a place to stay now? Ning Shu shook his head and said, Not yet. I don't know where to stay. I'll arrange a place for you, the officer said. Ning Shu was about to nod when he heard the school doctor's voice. Little Flower. Ning Shu and the officer looked at the school doctor. The school doctor was walking towards them. He was wearing a black windbreaker. When he walked over, everything was blurred. They could only see the school doctor walking towards them. Soon, the school doctor was in front of Ning Shu. Ning Shu introduced him. Uncle, this is my officer. The school doctor looked at the smile on Ning Shu's face indifferently. He reached out his hand to shake the officer's hand and said, Hello. The senior officer looked at the school doctor and scanned his face. He frowned and looked puzzled. You look familiar. The school doctor didn't say anything. Ning Shu raised the key in his hand and said, I found a place to stay. Chapter 103. Ning Shu saw the school doctor walk around and find a place to stay. Ning Shu looked at the key in the school doctor's hand and said to him, Uncle, I found a place to stay. The officer said he would find a place for me to stay. The officer was a trustworthy person. To the original owner, the officer was like a father. So when Ning Shu saw the officer, he couldn't help but want to get close to him. The school doctor raised his eyebrows and looked at the middle-aged officer. You found a place for this girl? Before the officer could speak, the school doctor said to Ning Shu, this room is the best in the base. Ning Shu blinked and said, thank you, uncle. Since they were already at the base, Ning Shu felt that he shouldn't trouble the uncle. The uncle had helped him a lot along the way. The leader of the special agent group patted Ning Shu's shoulder and said, since you already have a partner, then follow your partner. Although I'm one of the higher-ups in the base, it's not good for me to show favoritism. The apocalypse is cruel. It's good to have someone you can rely on. The officer walked away with his hands behind his back. Just like that, he left. Ning Shu turned his head stiffly and said to the school doctor awkwardly, my officer is quite humorous. The school doctor held the key and looked at Ning Shu. He sneered and said, useless? Let's go. The school doctor said to Ning Shu and turned to leave. Ning Shu's face twisted as she followed behind the school doctor. When they arrived at the residential building, the house was indeed quite nice. Uncle, how did you get this room? Ning Shu asked. When they reached the door, the uncle opened it and glanced at Ning Shu. You want to know? Can't I say? Ning Shu's mind immediately conjured up the scene of killing and robbing. This kind of thing was too common in the post-apocalyptic world. The strong were the truth. Ning Shu and the uncle were still talking when the door beside them opened. A person walked out from inside. They looked at each other and were quite surprised. Ning Shu was surprised by the uncle's ability to choose a room next to the female leads. But young Phoenix was surprised by the fact that two lowly people without abilities were staying here. Young Phoenix sized up Ning Shu and the school doctor and asked, why are you here? Ning Shu shrugged her shoulders. She didn't know why she was here. Seeing young Phoenix's expression as if she had swallowed a fly, Ning Shu was puzzled. Why couldn't she and uncle come here? Young Phoenix's expression made it seem as if they had sullied her. The school doctor glanced at young Phoenix indifferently. He pulled Ning Shu's arm and pulled Ning Shu into the house. Then he slammed the door shut, making young Phoenix angry and hateful. He was just a lowly person without abilities. That man had ignored her before. Now that she had awakened her ability, that man still ignored her. To put it bluntly, young Phoenix felt that her charm had been thwarted by the school doctor, so she resented him. Why don't you like me? What qualifications do you have to not like me? Young Phoenix's heart was full of resentment. Ning Shu sized up the room. Before the apocalypse, this kind of room could only be considered ordinary. The room was not very big, at most 70 or 80 square meters. But now, this kind of room was really good. It could even be considered a mansion. After all, the base was only so big, but there were so many people gathered here. It was even more valuable to have a private room. Ning Shu was even more curious about how this room came about. I'm going to take a shower, Ning Shu said and went into the bathroom. The door was a little low, so the school doctor had to lower his head when he went in. Ning Shu nodded and cleaned the room. He then wiped his sweat and heard the sound of the bathroom door opening. He turned around and saw the school doctor coming out of the bathroom. Ning Shu quickly covered his nose, afraid that he would have a nosebleed. The school doctor came out with a bath towel wrapped around his waist. The towel was loosely wrapped around his body, and his Apollo's belt was exposed. Long legs and a muscular body. Ning Shu's mouth was dry. Although this body was young, uncle, you shouldn't be so casual. The school doctor used a handkerchief to wipe his wet hair. The wet hair formed a shadow on his forehead, looking blurred and sexy. Ning Shu was speechless. Fuck, I really want to pounce on this person. The school doctor saw Ning Shu's dazed look and frowned. Why aren't you taking a shower? Do you know that you're dirty? I've been tolerating you for a long time. Ning Shu, it's heartbreaking to say such things to a lady. After all, she was a woman. Although she was young, the school doctor didn't treat her as a woman but as a child. Ning Shu snorted. Although this body was young, his mental age might be older than yours. Ning Shu went to the bathroom to take a shower. There were a lot of bathing items on the counter. Did these all belong to the school doctor? His worldview was refreshed again. The school doctor's obsession with cleanliness had reached the point where both humans and gods hated him. Ning Shu took a comfortable shower and smelled the fragrance. When he came out, he purposely walked a few rounds in front of the school doctor. The school doctor looked at Ning Shu and frowned. "You're still so ugly even after you've washed yourself clean?" The school doctor's tone was a little strange. Ning Shu felt his knees hurt. "Uncle, can't you be more considerate when you speak? It's too hurtful, too vicious." His heart was tired. "Do you know how to cook?" The school doctor asked Ning Shu. Ning Shu looked at the school doctor with a face full of ignorance. He said shyly, "Uncle, I don't know how to cook." The school doctor looked at him with disdain. "Aren't you a special agent? If you're in an extreme environment and there's no food, won't you starve to death? I've never seen such a weak special agent." Damn, is the school doctor in dissing mode? He criticized her from her toes to her hair. The conclusion was that she was really a scumbag. In the end, the school doctor saw that Ning Shu didn't care about anything. He put on his clothes and was about to leave. He said, "I'm going out to find food. Don't run around. If you get killed, you deserve it." Ning Shu nodded. He wondered if the school doctor was going to rob people again. After a while, the school doctor came back with a bag of things. The way he carried the bag was very handsome. Ning Shu took the bag from him and opened it. It was actually rice. He asked, "Where did you find this?" "Someone gave it to me." The school doctor patted the dust off his clothes and said indifferently, "Resources were scarce in the apocalypse. Who would give you things?" The school doctor said to Ning Shu. Ning Shu was dumbfounded. He had spent half his life in the hospital. When he entered the mission world, he had never cooked. Was he going to get a new skill? Chapter 104. In the end, Ning Shu didn't cook. The school doctor looked at Ning Shu's twisted and guilty face and said straightforwardly, "Cooking is a waste of food." Then the rice was cooked by the uncle. There was also steamed meat. The meat was cut very evenly, as if it was made from the same mold. The uncle's OCD was really a disease. Ning Shu ate the rice mixed with meat and burped. She was so moved that she almost cried. The apocalypse was really torturous. When she was a little princess, she ate all kinds of delicacies, but none of them were as delicious as this rice. Especially when she had eaten so many hardtack biscuits that her taste buds were about to disappear. Now that she was suddenly eating rice and oily meat, Ning Shu even wanted to hug the uncle's thigh without any shame. The uncle didn't eat the meat, but slowly ate the fried vegetables. His movements were slow and elegant, which was a sharp contrast to Ning Shu's ravenous eating. The school doctor frowned and looked at Ning Shu's oily face. He pulled the corner of his mouth and turned his head away. He couldn't bear to look at her. After eating, she put down the bowl and burped. She was very satisfied. She gave the uncle a thumbs up and said, "Uncle, you are quite capable. You can steal cars, dissect people, and even cook." Ning Shu suddenly froze. This was something that happened in the school world. She accidentally blurted it out. Ning Shu looked at the uncle. It seemed that he didn't hear what she said. Ning Shu was relieved. The uncle's ability was great, but his OCD was a bit serious. Also, his tongue was too sharp. It was unbearable. Ning Shu's heart was strong, so she turned a deaf ear to the uncle's sarcasm. The school doctor narrowed his eyes and moved to the side. "Can you wash your face and talk to me again?" Ning Shu was speechless. That was why the uncle was so annoying. Ning Shu went to the washroom to wash her face. Before she was done, she heard a series of urgent and ear-piercing sirens. It was so loud that it almost pierced her eardrums. Ning Shu quickly came out of the bathroom and asked the uncle, "What's wrong?" The uncle frowned and said, "Zombies are coming to attack the base. Take something to defend against the zombies." "Do I have to go too?" Ning Shu pointed at herself and asked. The school doctor rolled his eyes at Ning Shu. "You have to show your value if you accept the base's protection, little girl." Ning Shu looked at the school doctor in surprise. When did the uncle have such an awareness? The sirens were getting louder and louder. The uncle handed Ning Shu a gun and said, "Be careful. Don't rush into the zombie crowd. You don't have a superpower. You can't fight so many zombies even if you have great strength." Uncle's words. Ning Shu, she patted her chest and said, "If there is danger, I will run." The school doctor was speechless. The sirens became more urgent. The uncle and Ning Shu went out the door, and they ran into young Phoenix and Lone Wolf next door. Gu Lang's cold face was full of sarcasm. A lowly person without a superpower has to fight against zombies. Don't turn into a zombie in the end. The school doctor looked at him coldly. Gu Lang released his superpower and looked at the uncle warily. The uncle snorted and pulled Ning Shu's arm. They walked past Gu Lang and young Phoenix. How domineering! Gu Lang's handsome face was very long. He realized that he, a superpower user, was afraid of a lowly person without a superpower. It was really humiliating. Young Phoenix looked at the school doctor who was wearing a black windbreaker. Although this man did not have any special abilities, he was actually quite charming. However, in this post-apocalyptic world where the strong were respected, charm alone was not enough. One had to have strength. What made young Phoenix angry was that this lowly person without a superpower was so rude to her, but he was so nice to Flower. Flower was not comparable to her. The competitive young Phoenix tasted defeat in front of the school doctor. She was thinking about the uncle and wanted to subdue him to wash away her failure. In short, young Phoenix had the uncle in her heart. Flower's hands were covered in frost. She looked at the back of the school doctor and Ning Shu. What was so good about Flower who had nothing? Ning Shu followed the uncle to the base's entrance. He saw an overwhelming number of zombies rushing towards the base's entrance. The rotten smell made people faint. The base's walls were filled with cannons, bombs, and all kinds of new weapons. They were bombarding the zombies. Although they were lethal, they were not enough compared to the number of zombies. Even the people without superpowers in the base used stools and hose to fight against the zombies. However, the result was tragic. The ordinary people without superpowers were torn apart by the zombies. The zombies did not care about anything else. They tore apart the corpses on the spot. The scene was very bloody. The officer commanded the army to kill the zombies. He turned his head and saw Ning Shu. He frowned. Ning Shu shouted, "What are you doing here?" The sound of artillery shells was very loud. Ning Shu tried hard to hear what the officer said. He then shouted to the officer, "I'm here to fight against the zombies." The officer saw the school doctor next to Ning Shu. He did not say anything and continued to command the army to kill the zombies. There was also an even more dazzling scene, which was the ability users. All kinds of abilities were incomparably gorgeous, and they easily killed the zombies, especially Lone Wolf's lightning ability. When he struck the zombies' heads, the zombies immediately fell down. His destructive power was extremely dazzling. Countless people looked at Lone Wolf with amazement, admiration, and admiration. Lone Wolf felt the eyes of the people around him. His hands moved faster. The lightning in his hands shone brighter. It felt like he was deliberately showing off his skills. Ning Shu retracted his gaze and shot the zombie's head. The school doctor stood beside Ning Shu and did not move. Ning Shu said, "Such a large-scale attack. The zombies behind this are probably not weak. When this kind of zombie comes, you run first. You can't deal with it." The school doctor said lightly. He did not feel ashamed of running away. Ning Shu frowned and asked, "Is it a mutated zombie?" The school doctor nodded. "It is a mutated zombie. But it is stronger than the ones we have encountered before. Zombies evolve much faster than humans." The school doctor placed his hand on the group of paranormals and muttered to himself, "If I can dissect a few paranormals and observe their DNA, the gene fluid should not be just a half-finished product. It should be able to fully activate a person's superpower." Ning Shu was shooting while listening to the school doctor's mumbling. He pointed his ears and asked the school doctor, "Uncle, what are you talking about?" "The zombies are coming," the school doctor said lightly. Ning Shu nodded and began to kill the zombies. Finally, when the zombies were getting closer, Ning Shu directly picked up a long stick or a hoe on the ground and directly hit the zombie's head. Then the zombie's head exploded. Now Ning Shu learned to be smart. When the zombies had exploded, he immediately moved away to avoid being splashed in the face by the zombie's brain. The school doctor stepped back and watched Ning Shu kill the zombies. He casually killed the zombies that came close to him. The scene was in a stalemate. Everyone was trying their best to kill the zombies to keep themselves alive. Roar, an extremely penetrating roar sounded, and the zombies who heard this roar became even more violent, desperately rushing towards the entrance of the base. More and more people died. The air became more and more turbid. The stench, the smell of blood, the dust. Chapter 105. Roar. Another roar was heard. This sound made people's heart beat in disorder, their blood was surging, and they felt extremely dizzy. When the zombies heard this roar, they became restless. It was as if they had been blessed by some kind of power. They were restless and full of energy. Everyone was very uneasy. The officer commanded everyone and shouted, "Return to the base, quickly. Flower, quickly come in." Officer Ning Shu shouted. Ning Shu killed the zombie in front of him with a stick, turned around and ran into the base, standing next to the school doctor. The zombies scratched the base's walls and doors, trying to get in. Looking at the tide of zombies, Ning Shu had goosebumps all over his body. "It's coming," the school doctor said in a low voice. Ning Shu turned his head and saw a black. It was growing at a speed visible to the naked eye, moving quickly, and finally floating in the air above the base. This was a zombie. This zombie seemed to be no different from a normal person except for its blue face, and its eyes were moving. Obviously, it was different from ordinary zombies. It obviously had vision. Ning Shu's jaw almost dropped. He turned his neck stiffly, looked at the uncle and stammered, "Uncle, I can fly." It completely violated Newton's law of gravity. The mutated zombies they encountered before only had good jumping ability and fast speed, but floating in the air like this was simply challenging people's worldview. The uncle squinted his eyes, looked at the zombie floating in the air, and said, "Is it easier to evolve into a zombie?" Such a human-like zombie caused a commotion in the base, especially when it could fly like an immortal. It made the people in the base feel shocked and helpless. This zombie was really too powerful. An atmosphere of despair filled the air, making people's hearts more panicked. "Fuck, I'll fight you." A paranormal released a golden beam of energy towards the zombie, but the zombie didn't even try to dodge. Ning Shu was stunned for a moment. This zombie couldn't be so weak, right? It looked like a cow, but it was about to be hit. The power directly passed through the zombie's body, and people found that the power hit only an afterimage. So where did the zombie go? A mournful voice sounded, and people turned around to see that the zombie had directly passed through the chest of the paranormal who released the power. The zombie's bloody hand was still holding a beating heart. The zombie's eyes were very cold, and it directly threw the paranormal into the zombie crowd. The zombies below suddenly rioted, tearing the paranormal's body. The mutated zombie floating in the air, biting the bloody heart. Ning Shu stretched his neck and swallowed a mouthful of saliva. This scene was really bloody and disgusting. Everyone felt that their hearts were being gnawed by the zombies. With the previous impulsive, unlucky guy as an example, they didn't dare to move for a while, and it was even more impossible to rush. He was simply courting death. There were so many people, but the scene was silent, and the rapid sound of the alarm was more ear-piercing. The mutated zombie gnawed the heart in its hand, and stretched out its tongue to lick the blood at the corner of its mouth. Its eyes looked at the group of paranormal, looking at them as if they were food, and it made people scared. Ning Shu thought that the mutated zombie was more interested in the paranormal who was full of energy. "Uncle, what should we do now?" Ning Shu approached the school doctor uncle. Why were they in a deadlock now? The school doctor uncle stared at the zombie. "What else can we do, run?" Ning Shu was speechless. Although he said that, he didn't dare to move. What if the zombie took out his heart if he moved? Especially the paranormal, these people were the focus of the mutated zombie. The zombie looked at them with a pair of cold and ruthless eyes, as if it was trying to guess the taste of its food, and it was really stressful. "There's no other way, let's go together." Lone Wolf said with a cold face, "Let's go together." As soon as Lone Wolf's voice fell, the paranormal released their powers to attack the mutated zombie, but the zombie was too fast and dodged. Ning Shu was speechless. Zombies were so abnormal, how could they fight against such an invincible existence? However, the culprit was the school doctor uncle standing next to her, but she didn't dare to blame him. The zombie was surrounded by a group of paranormal, and there was always one paranormal that hit him. The zombie roared and looked at the paranormal with red eyes. Although there were so many people fighting the zombie, Lone Wolf and his team didn't have it easy, and they were very embarrassed. The officer ordered people to kill the ordinary zombies, and at the same time, he paid attention to the paranormal situation. Anyone with eyes could see that the paranormal situation was not good. Paranormal was very precious, and the death of one paranormal would cause the base to tremble in pain. Although there were now some people who could activate their powers, the number of paranormal was still very small, and they were a resource that every base fought for. The officer's face was sweating, and the muscles on his face were twitching. Ning Shu looked at him, but there was nothing she could do, because this kind of battle was not something she could intervene in. Ning Shu thought for a moment, and then she picked up the axe and went into the battle circle. She was very fast and strong, so she should be able to fight against the mutated zombie. Although the paranormal had their own powers, their speed and strength might not be as fast as her. Didn't they see that the mutated zombie's strength was its speed and physical strength? Where are you going? The school doctor uncle pulled Ning Shu's arm, raised his eyebrows and asked in surprise. Ning Shu had a hunch that if she said that she was going to kill the zombie, the school doctor uncle would despise her, so she said, "I need to go to the toilet." The school doctor uncle was speechless. "Stay here. If you run over, you will be accidentally injured by the paranormal's power. Don't overestimate yourself." The school doctor uncle said faintly, and then pulled out the gun from his waist, narrowed his eyes and aimed at the zombie. Ning Shu was speechless. The zombie's speed was too fast. "If you can hit the zombie, I will kneel down for you." The uncle pulled the trigger, but he didn't shoot the zombie directly. Instead, he shot at a distance from the zombie. Then Ning Shu saw a magical scene, as if the zombie took the initiative to throw itself at the bullet. The zombie was shot. Ning Shu knelt down with a thud. Fuck, how could this happen? The zombie was stunned at first, and then the muscles on its chest trembled, squeezing the bullet out of its body. Ning Shu kowtowed to the ground. Damn it, both of them were so unscientific. But when the zombie squeezed the bullet out, the paranormal released his most powerful power at the same time, hitting the zombie's body. The huge power directly slammed the zombie to the ground, and the huge power seemed to make the ground shake twice, raising a lot of dust. The zombie's clothes were torn, and the places where the power hit its body were so deep that the bones could be seen. It stood there, glancing at the paranormal, and finally stopped at the school doctor uncle. It seemed that the zombie had a deep impression of the human who hit it. Chapter 106. Although the mutant zombie was hit by the superpower, it didn't seem to have any special injuries, which made people feel helpless. The school doctor was very calm under the gaze of the mutant zombie. Ning Shu suspected that the school doctor's facial nerves were damaged because he didn't have any expression. But when he was mocking her, his face was full of disdain. Roar! The mutant zombie roared twice at the school doctor. Everyone thought that the school doctor would be the next one to be cut open, but the mutant zombie turned and flew away. After a while, it turned into a small black dot and disappeared into the horizon. Ning Shu thought, it ran away. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Their faces were filled with the lingering fear of surviving a calamity. Young Phoenix looked at the school doctor with a complicated expression. Seeing him calmly pull up Flower, who was kneeling on the ground, young Phoenix did not know why, but her heart burned with jealousy. She was jealous that Flower, who had nothing, had such a man who would not leave her. Lone Wolf stood beside young Phoenix. He saw the resentment, jealousy, and love on young Phoenix's face. He said coldly, "He's just a lowly person with no superpowers. You really think he's a hero with some marksmanship? Young Phoenix, what are you thinking?" Young Phoenix looked away and said to Lone Wolf, "I think he's very mysterious. He makes people feel uneasy. That's why I pay special attention to him." Young Phoenix saw Lone Wolf's expression and explained, He's just a person with no superpower. He can't survive in this apocalyptic world. I always feel that this man is dangerous. That's why I pay special attention to him. Lone Wolf looked at young Phoenix and said coldly, I hope so. Then he turned and walked away. Young Phoenix frowned and caught up with Lone Wolf. What do you mean? Are you doubting me? If that's the case, why are we still together? You don't even trust me. If that's the case, let's go our separate ways. Young Phoenix walked faster than Lone Wolf and left him with an angry back view. On the other side, Ning Shu was impressed by the school doctor's superb marksmanship. He kept asking the school doctor how he practiced his marksmanship. The school doctor glanced at Ning Shu and said, You can calculate the direction of a person's next move according to their movements. You can estimate the distance between you and the target and the time of arrival of the bullet. This way, the hit rate is very high. The school doctor said it very casually, as if it was a very simple thing. It was no big deal. Ning Shu knelt down with a thud. It was too fucking complicated. How fast was his brain calculating? Ning Shu felt that if it was so complicated, he might as well use an axe and a stick to do it. Don't your knees hurt from kneeling on the ground for no reason? The school doctor looked at Ning Shu with disdain. You're useless. It wasn't painful at first, but after hearing what the uncle said, Ning Shu felt that her knees were going to break. It was painful. Back in the room, the school doctor went to take a shower again. It hadn't been long, and he had to take a shower again. Ning Shu lowered his head and sniffed his collar. After staying with the school doctor for so long, he felt that he was very sloppy. After the school doctor came out of the shower, he was only wrapped in a bath towel. Ning Shu felt his hands itching. He wanted to pull the bath towel off the uncle. It was better not to wear it. Go take a shower. The school doctor said to Ning Shu while wiping his wet hair. I feel good. I don't need to take a shower. Ning Shu said. After the apocalypse, even drinking water was a problem. How could there be so much water to take a shower? There was a little sweat smell, but it was not that unbearable. The school doctor stopped wiping his hair and looked at Ning Shu indifferently. His gaze made Ning Shu's hair stand up. The school doctor crossed his legs. His two slender legs were faintly discernible under the bath towel. Ning Shu tilted his head and looked under the bath towel. It was really annoying. Hua, I'm talking to you. The school doctor saw Ning Shu tilting his head and staring blankly. He couldn't help but say, It's okay if you're stupid, but your ears have problems too. You can't be saved. Ning Shu came back to his senses and wiped the saliva from the corner of his mouth. When he was about to take a shower, the doorbell rang. Ning Shu quickly went to open the door. There was an officer in military uniform standing at the door. When he saw the officer, Ning Shu was surprised. He asked, Officer, why are you looking for me? I'm not looking for you. I'm looking for your partner. The officer said and entered the room. He looked around but didn't see anyone. Ning Shu asked, Where is he? The school doctor was still there. Ning Shu said, He probably went to get dressed. The school doctor was only wrapped in a bath towel. The officer looked at Ning Shu and said, You're still young. You're already with him? Ning Shu was speechless. What did he mean? Did the officer think that the uncle was naked because he did it with her? Ning Shu's mouth twitched. You're thinking too much. The uncle was such a pervert. It was still a question whether he liked women. After a while, the school doctor came out of the room. He was wearing a white shirt and a black windbreaker. When he saw the officer, his face was indifferent. Well, I have something to talk to you about. Let's go out and talk, the officer said to the school doctor. He was very respectful to the school doctor. The school doctor's eyes swept across Ning Shu's face. He nodded and followed the officer out. The school doctor turned back and said to Ning Shu, There are biscuits if you're hungry. Don't touch the food. You can wait for me to come back and cook. Ning Shu nodded. He didn't know what they were talking about. Why did they have to avoid him? Was there a secret? Not long after the school doctor left, the doorbell rang again. Ning Shu was a little surprised. He came back so soon. When he opened the door, he saw that it was young Phoenix. Young Phoenix looked at Ning Shu with a cold face. Ning Shu wanted to close the door without thinking. Young Phoenix blocked the door and said coldly, Flower, what's with your attitude? Ning Shu mobilized the internal force in his body and closed the door. He clapped his hands. She didn't come without a reason. Ning Shu didn't even give young Phoenix a chance to speak. Young Phoenix knocked on the door outside. The person inside refused to open the door. Young Phoenix said coldly, "Flower, I advise you to open the door quickly. Otherwise, I will destroy your door with my superpower." Damn, he was so arrogant that he came knocking on her door. Ning Shu said through the door, "What do you want from me?" "I'm not looking for you. I'm looking for your roommate," Young Phoenix said. "Flower, open the door." What day was it today? Why did so many people come to the school doctor? Was it because they were amazed by his shooting skills? "Uncle isn't here." "Come another day," Ning Shu said. "Flower, I asked you to open the door. What's with your attitude? Do you think that you're going to be arrogant when you come to the base with an officer supporting you and a man protecting you?" Young Phoenix's voice was sharp through the door. Chapter 107. Ning Shu was speechless. She didn't approach Young Phoenix at all, but the other party was trying to make trouble for her. She stayed far away from the protagonist. But was her charm too low? Ning Shu was considering if she should add some of her attributes to her charm. A charm of 1 point was too shabby. Ning Shu was thinking about why the female protagonist didn't like her. Outside the room, Young Phoenix was pounding on the door and calling Ning Shu's name. "Flower, flower." It was like she was asking for his life. Ning Shu opened the door and asked Young Phoenix angrily, "What do you want?" "I'm looking for your roommate." Young Phoenix pushed Ning Shu away and walked around the room. She didn't see the school doctor. Ning Shu asked, "Where is he?" Ning Shu's heart felt like it was about to explode. She questioned her so confidently. Ning Shu said, "I already said that he's not here." "Where did he go?" Young Phoenix asked again. Ning Shu rolled her eyes and said, "How would I know?" Young Phoenix sat on the sofa and waited. Ning Shu was stunned. What did she mean? Did she have to wait for the school doctor to come back? Ning Shu and Young Phoenix didn't speak. The room was quiet. Ning Shu didn't want to entertain guests. He didn't even pour a glass of water for Young Phoenix. "Flower, do you know your roommate?" Young Phoenix suddenly asked Ning Shu. "By the way, what's his name?" She didn't know the school doctor's name. His code name was Crazy, but she didn't know his name. Ning Shu shook her head and said, "I don't know." Young Phoenix's face turned ugly. "Flower, what do you mean? I'm just asking for his name." Damn it, she really didn't know the uncle's name. Ning Shu said impatiently, "I said I don't know, so I don't know." Young Phoenix was choked by Ning Shu's attitude. She said coldly, "Flower, don't be too proud." "What am I proud of? What's there to be proud of?" Ning Shu could not understand what Young Phoenix meant. Did Young Phoenix think that she deliberately did not tell the uncle her name? It was just a name. There was nothing he couldn't say. Young Phoenix's expression was cold. An icicle appeared in her hand and she pointed it at Ning Shu. Ning Shu immediately pulled out his gun and said coldly, "Young Phoenix, what are you doing?" "Hua, you are just a lowly person who has yet to awaken an ability. How dare you talk to me like that? Believe it or not, I can kill you and the officer won't say anything," Young Phoenix said coldly. Ning Shu was speechless. He squinted his eyes and aimed at Little Phoenix. He said loudly, "Little Phoenix, is there something wrong with your brain? Why did you come to my house to kill me?" He really couldn't understand what the female lead was thinking. "Based on your attitude towards me, it wouldn't be too much for me to kill you." The icicle in Young Phoenix's hand was spinning. The icicle was very sharp. When it came into contact with the air, it emitted white smoke. Fuck, she was really crazy. What was the female lead's mentality? Ning Shu saw Young Phoenix's teeth itching. He wondered if he had offended Young Phoenix in some way. After arriving at the base, he had no contact with Young Phoenix. The school doctor who was talking to the officer came back. When he walked into the room, he saw the two women confronting each other. He raised his handsome eyebrows and said, "What are you doing?" As he spoke, he pulled out a gun from his waist and aimed it at Young Phoenix. Young Phoenix was a lot more nervous when facing the school doctor. After all, he was someone who could even hit a zombie. Young Phoenix didn't think that she could be faster than a zombie. The school doctor looked at Ning Shu and said calmly, "What are you doing? You're so useless that they came knocking on your door." Ning Shu was speechless. Young Phoenix put away the icicle in her hand and said to the school doctor, "Put away your gun. I am not an enemy." The school doctor put away his gun and asked young Phoenix coldly, "What's the matter?" Young Phoenix did not know what to say. She came to this man on impulse. Because of this man, she quarreled with Lone Wolf. "I quarreled with Lone Wolf." Young Phoenix blurted out her thoughts and looked at the school doctor. The school doctor was confused and confused. This was the first time Ning Shu had seen such an expression on the school doctor's face. The school doctor was surprised and said, "What does it have to do with me?" Ning Shu was speechless. Young Phoenix's face turned green and then white. When she saw Ning Shu's smile, she felt as if she was soaked in boiling water. Her whole body was burning. The young Phoenix rushed out of the room and slammed the door. The door made a loud bang, and even the dust on the wall fell down. Ning Shu dug his ears. It was really loud. Ning Shu turned to the school doctor and said, "Uncle, she is here to act coquettishly." "What the hell?" The school doctor frowned. Ning Shu said, "Dust the sofa." Ning Shu asked, "Why should I dust the sofa?" "The place where she sat is very dirty," the school doctor said indifferently. Ning Shu was speechless. She was hopeless. The school doctor made some food for Ning Shu. It was enough for one person. Ning Shu asked, "Aren't you eating?" "I have eaten," the school doctor said indifferently. Ning Shu pursed her lips. The officer did not even bring her along to treat people to a meal. "Uncle, there is only one bed. Where am I supposed to sleep?" This was a single-room apartment and there was only one bed. Therefore, Ning Shu wanted to know where she was. The school doctor said indifferently, "You want to sleep with me?" When he spoke, his gold-rimmed glasses reflected the light. He looked very creepy and dangerous. Ning Shu quickly waved her hand and said, "I can sleep on the sofa." The school doctor nodded. He was obviously very satisfied with this suggestion. Ning Shu pursed her lips. She was a woman. Shouldn't she sleep on the sofa and show her manliness? She felt that the school doctor did not see her as a woman at all. At night, Ning Shu curled up on the sofa and looked at the school doctor on the bed with resentment. He really wanted her to sleep on the sofa. Whoosh, whoosh, in the middle of the night, Ning Shu was sleeping soundly when an ear-piercing alarm sounded. Ning Shu sat up in shock as if she was on the verge of death. Her entire body was in a daze. When she turned her head, she saw the uncle get out of bed and put on his jacket. "The zombies are attacking the base. Get up." The school doctor adjusted his collar and buttoned up his shirt. Ning Shu, attacking the city in the middle of the night. Oh my God. Ning Shu jumped off the sofa and picked up the guns, sticks, and axes on the table. She followed the school doctor out the door. Many people rushed to the entrance of the base. Some people did not even put on their clothes. They put on their clothes as they ran. At the entrance of the base, a huge searchlight shone on the zombies outside the base. These zombies tirelessly rushed towards the entrance of the base. Even if they were blocked by the electric fence at the entrance and were electrocuted until their bodies smelled black, they did not know fear. Chapter 108. The zombies were really smelly, and the rotten smell could make people faint. Ning Shu stood on the high wall of the base and looked at the zombies below. She felt very bitter. She had been in the apocalypse for so long, and she had given the gene solution to the officer. Why hadn't the system let her go back? Roar, the roar was very familiar. It was from the mutated zombies during the day. It was really endless. Did they want to fight with the base? The rocket bombs attacked the zombies, but the endless zombies were rushing over. At night, people's vision was limited. Paranormals had super strong vision, but it was a challenge for ordinary people. The mutated zombie was suspended in the air, and the searchlights were focused on it. The mutated zombie had changed its tattered clothes and was wearing new clothes. It looked no different from a normal person. Ning Shu looked up at the zombie. She was really annoyed. This zombie was as intelligent as a human, and it was particularly difficult to deal with so many zombies. It was like cheating. Ning Shu shot the head of the ordinary zombies, and the paranormals dealt with the mutated zombies. So many paranormals were powerless to deal with the mutated zombies. If the paranormals were not careful, their hearts would be taken out by the mutated zombies. It simply made people's hearts turn cold. Ning Shu was killing zombies while paying attention to the situation of the mutated zombies. The uncle didn't do anything, as if he was just a bystander. But no one said anything, as if they didn't see the carefree school doctor. Ning Shu was killing zombies when she suddenly felt a huge force on her back. Her body involuntarily flew forward, and the worst thing was that she was flying in the direction of the mutated zombies. Ning Shu hurriedly circulated her chi and turned back. When she turned around, she saw that it was young Phoenix who had done it. Ning Shu's heart was like a grass mud horse. The plot was really irresistible. Was she really going to die in the hands of young Phoenix and be dismembered by zombies like in the original plot? Ning Shu instantly understood why the system hadn't summoned her back for such a long time. There was still such a thing. Flower, dodge, Ning Shu shouted as he pulled out his gun and fired at Ning Shu. The bullet didn't hit Ning Shu, but hit the zombie behind Ning Shu. However, when Ning Shu tried to escape, the zombie still managed to injure his back. He felt the zombie's nails scratching his back painfully. Ning Shu was so angry that he couldn't care less. He ran towards young Phoenix and fired a shot. Young Phoenix released an ice shield to block Ning Shu's bullet. Fuck, even if I die, I'll drag you down with me. Ning Shu ran over and grabbed young Phoenix's collar. Then he smashed young Phoenix to the ground like a whip. Once, twice. Young Phoenix's face turned green as blood spurted from its mouth. It looked at Ning Shu with fear in its eyes. Lone Wolf saw young Phoenix's situation and quickly came to its aid. Ning Shu directly used his chi to stab young Phoenix's heart with a sharpened wooden stick. Young Phoenix's body moved a little, and the stick avoided its heart and pierced its stomach. Young Phoenix wailed in pain. Lone Wolf rushed over with lightning flashing in his hand. He was about to hit Ning Shu's head, but in the next second, Lone Wolf's hand was pierced by a bullet. Blood spurted out. Ning Shu was stunned for a moment before his wrist was grabbed by someone. Ning Shu didn't think and wanted to fight back with the wooden stick. "Girl, it's me." The school doctor's voice was very low. Ning Shu calmed down and looked up at the school doctor. "Useless." The school doctor pulled Ning Shu into the base and didn't intend to care about the zombies at the gate. Back in the room, Ning Shu felt pain in his back. It was very painful. It was as if salt was sprinkled on the bleeding wound. Ning Shu's body began to tremble. Could it be that this mission couldn't be completed? "Lie down," the school doctor uncle said to Ning Shu. Ning Shu looked at the needle in the school doctor uncle's hand and asked, "Uncle, what is this?" "You are infected with the zombie virus." The school doctor poked Ning Shu's arm with the needle. The whole needle went into the skin. It was too painful. Fuck, couldn't he be gentler? Then Ning Shu realized a problem. She was caught by zombies. She was infected with the zombie virus. Did that mean she would become a zombie? Fuck, how could this be? She thought about how the school doctor uncle killed an infected agent without hesitation. She couldn't have been killed by the uncle, right? Ning Shu endured the pain in his back and asked the school doctor uncle, "Uncle, what did you inject into me?" Was it because they knew each other and gave her a euthanasia drug? The school doctor uncle frowned and looked at Ning Shu. He said, "This drug can prevent your brain from being invaded by the virus to a certain extent." Hearing this, Ning Shu felt relieved. The school doctor wouldn't kill her directly. She guessed that she would become a research subject. This was good. "Uncle, can you give me some painkillers?" Ning Shu was in so much pain. The places where the zombies scratched were burning. The heat began to spread to the whole body. Ning Shu could even hear the cells in his body wailing. They were tortured by the powerful virus. Even his brain began to feel pain and heat. The virus had spread to his brain. Ning Shu finally understood why zombies were like walking corpses. They were monsters without any thoughts. It was because the virus was too destructive. "Flower, focus." The school doctor patted Ning Shu's face. Ning Shu tried to open her eyes and look at the school doctor uncle. Ning Shu was in so much pain. She didn't know how long the pain lasted. Everything in front of her blurred. An alluring scent that she had never smelled before entered her nose. She was extremely hungry and wanted to pounce on the man in front of her, press down on his body, bite his neck, cover his chest, and then dig out his beating heart that was full of temptation. Ning Shu wanted to make a sound, but found that her speech system had been destroyed. She couldn't say anything. When she opened her mouth to make a sound, it was like air was leaking out of her throat. Fuck, life was full of evil. She had become a zombie. She wanted to circulate her qi, but found that the qi in her body was gone. Her body had become clumsy. Ning Shu was speechless. But he was very hungry now. There was a living person beside him. Ning Shu reached out and wanted to grab the school doctor uncle. A cold black thing was placed on her forehead. Don't point a gun at me. She was afraid. Ning Shu suddenly quivered and retracted her claws. The school doctor uncle looked at Ning Shu. Conscious? Ning Shu couldn't hear what the school doctor was saying. The virus had destroyed her hearing. She couldn't see very well. It was like 800 degrees of myopia. She couldn't distinguish between humans and animals. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.